Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Berman.
Here.
Councilmember Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Niss.
Here.
4 present.
Thank you very much. And the first item on the agenda is oral communication. If any member of the public would like to speak to any item not on the agenda, have we received any speaker cards? No. So we'll move right along to agenda item number 1, which is the fiscal year 2015. I'm looking at the wrong agenda. Where's the right agenda? Gotcha. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the Utilities Department and all of their funds. Does staff have a
Sure. Councilmember Berman, Walter Rossman, Budget Director, good evening. Before we start, I just would like to let you know that we had an At Places memo emailed to you early this afternoon. It's a slight modification for the Utility Department's budget and 3 funds. We received notification from People Strategy and Operations that one position would have to be reclassified. We're asking you as part of the motion later on this evening to include this At Places memo. Otherwise, Valerie Fong is here today to speak to the Utilities Department operating and capital budget. And we have in your detailed agenda, we have the page numbers available for you as well.
So just one quick question.
Sure.
So the At Places memo, will you tell us when we get to that and what we're reviewing, or can you tell us what page this is on so we can just make the notation now?
It is actually not included in the budget document. It is just an addition to the budget. It actually modifies the proposed budget.
Okay. And
So,
you'll tell us
we'll
what
have this be a
page.
totally separate motion, or does it fall under one of the...
When you tentatively approve the Utilities Department budget, at that time I ask you to actually, in the motion, read in the At Places memo, if agreeable to the committee.
But there are many parts to the utilities part, so you'll tell us where it goes.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Walter. Chair Berman, members of the Finance Committee, Valerie Fong, Utilities Director. I'm going to give you some quick highlights of our department budget. That word there, mission, it's what I would really call, and it's something we developed during our strategic plan efforts, the strategic destination. And it is to earn the high satisfaction of our customers with cost-competitive provision of safe, reliable, and environmentally sustainable utility services. We have 5 different divisions within our department. The administration division is charged with the overall management of the department. That includes communications, regulatory compliance, budget coordination, legislation and regulatory policy analysis, and then personnel and administrative support for the department. The Customer Support Services Division does billing for 7 of the city's utilities. So it's not just the 5 under the Utilities Department, but it also includes refuse and storm drain. That division is also responsible for meter reading, credit and collection, the efficiency and renewable energy programs, and coordination of the commercial fiber optic connections. Our engineering division is responsible for managing all phases of our capital improvement program projects for our electric, gas, water, sewer, and fiber optic utilities, and also responsible for new and upgraded services to our customers. The operations division does all operations, maintenance, and emergency response on our systems. And the resource management division is responsible for long-range planning, the acquisition of electricity, natural gas, and water, financial planning, and then rate development. Next slide. On this slide, we list some of our accomplishments. The first one is having a carbon-neutral electric supply portfolio in calendar year 2013. And that was accompanied with our, you may recall, award-winning carbon-neutral rap video. We've also done expanded youth outreach efforts. We've updated our comprehensive financial plans as a result of an earlier audit that we had by the City Auditor's Office. We also updated the reserve guidelines. Those have been reviewed by this body and will be going to the full council on June 9th. And we also continue to receive and maintain the Reliable Public Power Provider designation. That one is for proficiency, sound business practices, and a utility-wide commitment to safe and reliable delivery of electricity and energy efficiency. Next slide. Our initiatives for fiscal year 2015. include the CIP, which is our CIP capital improvement programs, which are focused on infrastructure replacement and improvement, various plans and programs. We've got the emerging tech pilots, and those include development of a commercial Customer Connect program. Right now we've got a residential Customer Connect program and other smart grid projects. The communication outreach is designed to obtain more customer feedback and to evaluate our outreach effectiveness. One of the big strategic initiatives we've got is workforce development. I think you're probably seeing that across the city. This is particularly important as we anticipate retirements over the next 1 to 4 years. Many retirements, up to 50, are eligible in the next 1 to 4 years as our workforce matures. Our goal is to guard against knowledge voids. And then we are implementing new technology projects that are in the Utilities Information Technology Strategic Plan and Roadmap. From an overall department-wide perspective, we are proposing no rate increases for the electric, gas, water, and sewer utilities. You have reviewed the financial forecasts for those 4 utilities. Actually, you've also reviewed them for fiber optics. That one will have a CPI increase. We are asking for a utility safety officer, and we are asking to reclassify a utility safety coordinator to be a project coordinator. The utility safety officer is to ensure compliance with workplace safety and environmental regulations. It is to help us with the planning and implementing of our health and safety programs, and that person will also conduct emergency awareness and other safety-related training. The reclassification of the utility safety coordinator to utility project coordinator will result in a net savings. This is in response to audits for inventory and contract management, and for which we are still in the process of implementing solutions. And just as a sidebar comment, between both internal and external audits to which we are subjected because we are highly regulated, we do feel like we're under perpetual audit, and we do feel like these audits are sort of pancaking on top of each other. We can't implement some of the findings and recommendations before we're under a next audit. So it's unfortunately the same group of folks that end up in all of these audits. We are also asking for a principal management analyst. This is a new position. It would increase our costs by $188,000. That it includes benefits. This person will supervise our team of analysts that are responsible for operation, maintenance, the development and implementation of our customer service system and associated services and solutions to serve our customers. For the electric fund, we've got a couple of new initiatives. You have reviewed the local solar programs. That was approved by the full council on April 21st. Within that plan, we've got a community solar program, which we plan to launch in January 2015, and a solar donation program that will launch in July of 2015. We are also expanding our demand response, which is our pilot program. This one is a peak demand reduction program, and that will include additional and smaller commercial customers. In terms of funding requests, we are proposing to increase funding for solar rebates by $620,000. This would reflect increasing market demand as we complete the state-identified obligation of the 10-year obligation for the City of Palo Alto of $13 million of expenditures in solar rebates. And we're also requesting an additional full-time equivalent for our meter shop. That technician will be responsible for the maintenance, installation, and programming of advanced meters, and for handling our meter request backlog, which includes recalibration of many meters that we've got out in the field, as well as resealing them to prevent meter tampering. For the electric fund, we're proposing a $9.7 million capital budget. And the major components of that budget include customer connections, system improvements, undergrounding projects, and substation improvements. In the fiber optic fund, we've got a couple of initiatives, which is to complete the assessment of a citywide wireless network and to also develop a dark fiber master plan to address future system management use, expansion, and enhancement of services to our customers. I mentioned earlier this is the one utility that will have within the Utilities Department that will see a rate increase. It is a council pre-approved CPI rate increase. That's an annual increase. This year it'll be 2.6%. Of the revenues that we'll collect, we're proposing a $400,000 capital budget split between customer connections and system improvements. For the gas fund, we're in the process of implementing the Palo Alto Green Gas Program. That was approved by the full council, recommended to the full council by this body and then approved by the full council on April 21st. And we will also be working, as we do every year, on gas main replacement projects. The capital budget is proposed to be $2.3 million. That is similarly split, as we do with all our utilities, between customer connections. In this case, it'll be gas main replacements, system improvements, meter replacements, and then for the 4 receiving stations that we've got that connect us to the PG&E system, we're proposing some security enhancements. The wastewater collection, also known as the sewer fund, has a couple of initiatives for fiscal year 2015. One is to investigate and eliminate tree roots in over 30,000 feet of sewer lines. And then, as we do with all of our infrastructure improvement plans, we've got rehabilitation and augmentation projects that we'll continue to do. We're proposing a $4.1 million capital budget that's split between system rehabilitation, system improvements, and customer connections. And I forgot to mention that we do get reimbursed for the customer connections and for all the utilities. In our water fund, we are moving forward with a development of a water system master plan. I believe you might recall we had some discussion of it when we brought the water financials to this body. And that will look at identifying and presenting capital improvement and replacement projects that are required to ensure optimal reliability and service levels. We are also looking at completing the environmental review phase for the recycled water project to deliver recycled water to our city parks and to the Stanford Research Park. The water fund proposed capital budget is $5.4 million, and that is split between seismic system upgrades, reservoir coating, and that is to reduce leaks and corrosion of the reservoirs, system improvements, meters and hydrants, the water system master plan that I discussed as a new initiative, and customer connections, for which we get reimbursed. I think that concludes the slides, and so I have many staff here to respond to any questions you might have.
Yes, thank you very much.
I just wanted to say thank you to Valerie Fong and her staff, to Anna and to John out there for spending some time with me this morning. And this is my first year on finance. I really appreciated that.
And so do we all. Thank you very much for the presentation. And so should we take these fund by fund? Is that typically the
yes, please,
most
Chair Berman, I
logical
appreciate
fashion?
that.
So we'll start off with the electric fund. And does staff have any presentations for the individual funds, or should we do, in addition to
we actually
Director
know
Fong?
this DDB, Valerie Fong finished her presentation. She wrapped them up on a high level for each fund.
Perfect.
And if I just want to point you to the pages, an operating budget for the electric fund is 345 to 357.
Sure.
And a capital budget 166 to 218.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with, and thank you for that. So we'll start with the electric fund. Do any colleagues have any questions or comments they'd like to start us off with? And we're going to go informal. Pat?
Well, before the electric fund, we have some overview elements. On slide number 4, we have as a 2015 initiative communication outreach. And we do a lot of communication on an ongoing basis. What makes this a 2015 initiative? What's different about it?
We're looking to get more direct feedback from the customers on the effectiveness of our communications. That's sort of the main goal here. So we're going to do it through surveys, And actually, I think Debbie Katz, our communications manager, might be here, and she might be happy to give a little bit more background on that one.
Great.
Hello. Yes, I'm Deborah Katz, Utilities Communications Manager. In addition to what Valerie was mentioning, which is making a much more concerted effort to get some feedback from customers, particularly, we've done a lot of things where we do once a year surveys that are very kind of general overviews. But I think where we have been lacking is at the point of interaction feedback and looking for ways to find out from a customer when they've dealt with us, whether it's through our customer service center or because they've had field services or just because there's a project in their neighborhood or street, getting their feedback at that time, both about how we're doing in general and how they feel about our communication with them. Are we meeting their needs? So that's one big set. Another area that we're looking to do is getting more involved with customers where they're at, if you will. That's everything from social media to expanding our youth outreach, getting more involved with youth organizations, the schools, and being out there, as well as community events and groups. Rather than us holding something and trying to get everybody to come to it, looking for more ways where we can go where people already are.
So when we're looking for that feedback, are you looking at kind of looking at all customers equally and kind of a randomized feedback?
Well,
Or
for
are you doing
example,
other
if you know, when I was talking about that point of interaction, that's going to be whoever's interacting with us. So it's not random in that sense. It's the selected group. When we do more general surveys, we do try to, well, we don't try to, we do use randomized methods so that, and we've taken the step of looking to use online surveys in conjunction with telephone, because we realize we're getting very different groups of people in terms of who's willing to sit on the phone for 10 minutes versus who will go on and do a quick online survey.
Right, so we might get very different responses from the average ratepayer and their experience versus even out of those who have that direct interaction, a subset who have an unfavorable experience. And I've heard anecdotally, and some of these may be actually even public works rather than utilities, but circumstances where residents, in some cases businesses, have felt that they've had a significant unanticipated impact on them and acute dissatisfaction with the response. So that's not the typical or average interaction that our ratepayers would have, but I think it's worthy to understand those interactions. And is there any pattern to that small subset where we're having highly dissatisfied customers, even if they represent a small minority of the total customers? And to understand that better and what's going on.
Yes, I would agree completely, and I think there's two points there. One is the idea that when somebody complains, they may not be the only person unhappy, so that I think people have various formulas for one unhappy letter might represent 10 customers or 100 customers, so that's always something to keep in mind. And then also for looking for a person may have some general dissatisfaction, or rather they may have a lot of specific things in a situation they're unhappy about, some of which are very unique, but many of which you can see how, okay, that's going to come up every time. And we have already often taken those individual situations and changed a policy or procedure because we realize, okay, this was a heads up that we needed to make some change like that.
Okay, so
we're definitely looking to do that kind of thing.
Okay, great, thanks.
Karen?
Yes, thank you. And before I forget it, on the rare occasion, thankfully it's the rare occasion, I have need to use utility services. I recently had to for a water heater that had gone out in a cottage that I own, and the service is just remarkable and continues to be quick turnaround, friendly, courteous, wonderful service, and my tenant was most impressed as well. So thank you for that. My first questions are actually just some clarifications, if you could. before we get to the specific departments, but funds, but the funds in the aggregate on page 342. Some clarifications on that, if we could, please. So, total cost of capital improvements, so we're up basically $10 million. Is that right? 342. Hang on a second here. I should have brought my other glasses.
About $10 million for electric.
2014.
I'm looking at total CIP, though. Total
Annual.
cost of CIP improvements, so.
I'm looking at page 343, dollars by expense category, which shows an increase of the CIP by about $5 million.
Well, I think Karen's asking at first about 342 workload measures, that table.
Yeah, workload measures, yeah. Because it's, you see?
Yeah.
So, right. I guess that's up
Middle of
5
the
million.
page.
I guess it's up 5 million. In the middle of the page, yeah. And Chair is correct, it's workload measures. So can you explain to me the uptick there?
For FY 2014?
You mean as to why the estimated is up? Or
Yeah, well, from, so we've got from
the 2014
2014 accepted, and then you've got the estimated for 2014. So it goes from 16 to 26, and then even from the, and then the proposed is 21. So it's a pretty huge fluctuation. That's a lot of bucks.
So if I may explain quickly, the estimated column we're confirming right now, we brought forth to you in March 18th, the Finance Committee, the mid-year budget adjustments, and these did include adjustments to capital improvements. So that's most likely the adjusted budget, but we'll have to confirm that.
Yeah, a little clarification on that would be good.
Sure.
And then, same thing here, kind of in the aggregate here. Well, the percent is not very large. The next one, the department summary, and it's got dollars by fund and then total dollars by fund. You know, as a percent, it's only up 3%, but as a dollar amount, it's up almost $7 million. So, can you give me like the broad brush of that? That's, I'm sure, spelled out in the different funds, but can you give me kind of a broad brush for here before we get into the specific funds? Is that possible?
well, obviously it's in water and wastewater is where the increase is. Right here in the aggregate, if you look at the change.
And I can speak quickly for the water fund, for resource management, which is, I believe, how we buy our utilities, correct? That is an increase of $1.8 million. So that's the major increase in the water fund. The other minor changes for operations and maintenance, $300,000, as well as administration, which is $360,000. Administration usually is a combination of salary and benefits, but it also could be cost allocation charges to other funds, et cetera, which bring up this number.
And what about wastewater?
Wastewater, we have to flip 2 pages quickly.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest, I mean, we're going to be going through those funds, so that
We
might
are.
be a, I mean, if we're going to dive into the detail, if that's all right with you, if
Yeah.
we're going to,
Yeah. We're,
Okay, I was trying to get a broad brush of the general, because that's what the presentation was too, is kind of the broad brush. So I was kind of following that just to get a kind of an overall look and then diving
okay,
into
we'll
details.
keep
But we
track.
can do
If
it-
you
we
ask
can
the
do it
same
either way.
question again when we get there, we're not going to answer it. No, I'm just kidding.
You can hit the red light. Okay. All right. So if you want to go to, so I had questions there, but if you want to go to the electric fund.
that'd be great.
Okay. And it's a little bit of chasing your tail here a little bit. But so page 351, I think, is still the electric fund.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So on page 351, yeah, there are a lot of areas where there's no staffing increases. There's no FTE increase, but the dollar amounts go up significantly, especially under line person cable. I guess that's splicer, SPL, specialist? Specialist? Splicer, okay, didn't know which it was. I mean, that number's up like 1.1 million. So the number's going up without the FTEs going up. I know we did some marketed.
That's the total.
So that's the salary. That's
So
not the
that's
increase.
11 line persons, cable splicers, cost 1.138.
Okay, I'm looking at the wrong chart. I'm looking at the wrong chart.
We do have
Sorry
an
about
increase
that.
I mean, there is that
There
somewhere.
is the increase, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong chart. Go to somebody else while I get myself organized here.
Liz.
No, I'm saving my questions up.
Well, that's not fair. So I'll ask a couple of questions. So a couple on the aggregate, and
There we
I
go.
didn't do this on Tuesday. Hopefully, there's an explanation that applies to all departments. But I'm trying to make the numbers line up. And on page 338, under the table, the department table, the fiscal year 2015 position totals 243 and a half full-time positions. And then when I go to page 344, and then there were also some hourly. When I go to page 344, the table there under department summary says 271.77. And this was the same thing in police and fire and others. Is there?
Sure, I'd be happy to explain that. So what we're trying to do here is on the table on page 3. Let me quickly look.
first one.
344. The total there is the total budgeted positions in all the utility funds.
Okay.
However, functionally, you have positions such as administrative services, which are paid by the utility funds, however, report to the chief financial officer.
Okay.
And so what you see on another way of putting it, page 338, you see all the positions which directly report to Val.
To Val. I see. And it's the same for the other departments as
It's
well.
the same for the departments.
Thank
yes.
you. Then I won't ask those questions over and over again.
Management analysts.
It's all management analysts,
Oh,
Liz
yeah.
tells me.
They actually keep track of
Pretty
all the
much.
information.
For those who were lucky enough not to be here on Tuesday, we had an inside joke about management analysts.
And that's why you need so many management analysts to do all that.
That's exactly right. So on page 349, under the budget summary table, dollars by category, and again, this is something that I noticed in a lot of the departments. Retiree medical, the increase in retiree medical is pretty dramatic, this kind of spread across other departments as well. Is there I know healthcare is expensive and increasing, although hopefully plateauing at the moment. But is there a reason for such a dramatic increase?
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that. Across all funds, veterinary medical went up by $2 million from the last fiscal year. On May 29th, we actually will have a presentation for the Finance Committee with a detailed report from the city's actuary who will explain those. But just in general, it's an update. We do a biannual valuation for our veterinary healthcare plan and fund. And based on healthcare cost changes, actuarial changes, we actually have quite an uptick from last fiscal year to this fiscal year.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say a lot of this driven by actuarial methodology changes.
Gotcha. On page 350 in the revenue budget summary, in the middle section, revenues, charges to other funds is projected to drop 40%. Is there a big chunk that a change in operation or charges that leads to a change of 200,000, especially considering it was pretty consistent for a couple of years previously?
I do not know the detail on this one. We'll have to come back to you on this one.
Great.
Unless the utility staff knows the reasons for that.
It's the 40.9% decrease.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
And usually the charges to other funds which utility makes is for the several ones. One of them is actually the natural gas, electricity, etc., which the utility department charges to the general fund, to the vehicle fund, etc., for consuming those energy resources. But actually those costs went up, so this is a net number. So I need to figure this one out.
Great. Thank you, Walter. Those were all the questions I think I had. Karen, would you like to ask some more questions?
No, because when I looked at my notes, actually, I'm good with that. I do have questions about the CIP when we are ready for that.
Why don't we do operating and CIP all at once?
Could I take
Is
my
that-
turn
do you
and
not-
do
Is that
it?
not how, well, hold on one second. Sorry. Is that not how you normally do it? Or do you do first operating?
What
and
about
then-
fund? If you did it by fund, are you able to release any people or not? Does that matter? Okay, let's take that back.
Okay. So should we run through all of the operating and then all of the CIP, the capital? Is that what we're thinking?
It almost seems like it makes more sense to do it by fund, since you're on that topic, all electric,
Yeah.
all gas,
That's-
and then all wastewater.
That's what I was thinking. So you had some questions on that?
I've got a general question while we're at the general level. The workforce development, are you going to talk about that separately, or you want to talk about it now, or what would be an appropriate time to talk about that?
We're happy to answer any questions you might have. I did mention, at least in the overview, that is a big initiative for us. And we are losing people to other agencies, and so this is a continuing concern. Jim has certainly authorized certain counter actions on our part, which we've managed at least to keep some folks.
So I think it's important, though, that we have it discussed in public and discuss the difficulty of attracting people, especially in an expensive community to live in, expensive housing and so forth. And then the fact that you have a considerable poaching problem going on. And I think it's really important, especially as we look at the budget, to realize a lot of times the poachers are offering significantly more money. And you have the kind of operation where, as Karen said, when she needed to call somebody, they came out. And they're an employee, and it's important that we do compensate them. So that I think is pretty much what we're talking about tonight, is how this is your workforce, how they divvied up, how are they paid, and so forth. And while we're not doing any negotiating here, I simply did want to call out that I know that's an issue.
So let's go ahead and do operating budget question, operating and capital questions. So if folks have any capital questions, now's for the electric fund. On the electric. Now's a good time. Please.
168. So first I have a comment, which is on page 168, or about page 168, which is the KV electric intertie. You probably don't need to pull staff up, but it's pretty impressive when you read this. It's like the net annual savings resulting from this could be as much as $2 million annually. And that this also is the project that would provide us an alternate source or secondary source of power. So this is something we've been waiting for, looking for, and it looks like it's maybe kind of I don't know how close to implementation this takes us. Because I know it's been in the works for a good while.
Tom Marshall, Assistant Director. It has been in the works, and it's been a little challenging.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so it's continuing on. We are still running into challenges in negotiation with the various parties because there's, the Department
Tom,
of
can you
Energy.
just raise the microphone a little bit?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So we have the Department of Energy and we have Stanford, and now we have PG&E in the mix on discussing this. But we've made significant progress in terms of having an alternative outlined of what we're going to do, how the interconnection would be made. We've done a number of studies to figure out what needs to be done to make that interconnection, and what we're working on now is bringing all the parties together to reach some form of agreement so we can make this interconnection. And as I mentioned before, there's PG&E is now in the mix, and I don't want to get in all the details of why, but that's a whole issue that we're starting to negotiate and figure out how to work through that process.
Do you have any guess as to when we might be at completion?
We're hoping that by the end of this year, we would have be able to make a decision on whether we're going to be able to move forward with this. I mean, we do have another alternative for a electric supply location, but this is still the preferred alternative for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, which is the cost savings and we think it provides better reliability. And it also provides benefits to the general electric system as a whole.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you for that update, and we're all hopeful about this one. There are an awful lot of undergrounding projects, and I guess my question about those, I know I saw a lot of these. Undergrounding projects, and I guess the big question I have about those is the funding that's indicated in the CIPs here. Does that consider coordination with Public Works redoing streets, and is there a cost share that's being considered for undergrounding in coordination with street resurfacing and improvements?
Okay, so we do coordinate with Public Works on the street paving when we're doing underground districts. So all these projects go into the project coordinator. So we try to give them advance notice, and we put them on notice that we're going to be doing the undergrounding in those areas. And typically they avoid street resurfacing until we've completed the undergrounding.
So I guess advance notice says something a little bit different to me than coordinating a plan. Advance notice, might to me mean, I don't want to get into detail about this, but it actually does impact budget, as well as something that's caught the public's attention has for years. So advance notice I could interpret as, a month from now we're going to do the project at, let's just say, Embarcadero and whatever. But a plan would be, you're laying out a year's schedule and you're coordinating with Public Works about when the resurfacing is going to happen compared to when you're doing undergrounding.
We do that. We can call it a plan. So we put a 5-year plan. As the budget here is 5 years, we're indicating where the undergrounding districts are going to be out 5 years, which is coordinated with the street paving plan. And we do meet monthly to discuss changes, or I think now maybe bi-monthly, discuss changes to our schedule so that we stay coordinated on the paving part of these.
And we haven't gotten the Public Works budget yet, so are the costs for the undergrounding, is that a shared cost? You figure, you're digging up the street anyway, so they're going to resurface the street too, so 50% of the cost is allocated to utilities and 50% to Public Works. I mean,
No, that doesn't happen. I think one of the issues on the undergrounding, it's exempt from street cut fees, the underground projects, and that's part of the, I don't know if the code or it was part of the policy on the street cut fees. So, and that was, I believe, to try to keep the cost of the undergrounding lower so they didn't end up paying additional costs for repairing the street were not allocated to the undergrounding projects.
Okay. Then just since this is our only crack at the CIPs, thank you for that, Tom. Sure. Since this is our only crack at the CIP, I do have questions on some of these that under the design element, because that's what I do. Under the design element, it talks about on a number of these, it says that a project is categorically exempt from CEQA. Some yeah, some no. I noticed on the Edgewood Wildwood one that is a National Register district there, probably where this is. So it seems like there might be an impact there or something that would be more sensitive. And on many of them it says, well, on one or two it says subject to ARB review. On many of them it says it would be subject to, I think, the landscape architect. Can't find one now, of course, but I highlighted a bunch of them. Anyway, subject to the landscape architect's review. Is there a, here we go, like for instance, page 190, and this is for above ground equipment. So is there a standard that we could improve upon so that we have better looking, less impactful above ground devices and installations than we've had in the past? Or are we using the same model that we've had in the past?
Well, there's a relatively small selections of models that you can purchase. What we purchase is pretty much a standard across PG&E or across the country in terms of like a pad-mounted transformer or a load break box, there isn't a lot of choice on different designs for those.
In fact, that standardization is pretty important if we ever had to do mutual aid or other issues if we have emergencies across various systems.
Okay, all right. Those are my electric fund questions.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions?
Yep.
Oh, yes, sorry, you told me. Yes.
Karen covered a lot of what I would have asked about, especially that coordination, since it just happened in my neighborhood, and though people ask you right away, didn't they just pave my street? Why are they digging it up again? So under your smart grid technology, which is certainly an interesting discussion, and that's on page 200 and over on 201. Oh, and so I've just stolen one of Mark's questions. So talk a little about this. We've had a couple of people from the public deriding the fact that we're going to do this. So discuss this a little bit and where you think this will take us. And we're going to put within the next 4 years about $10 million into it.
Dean?
I have a feeling that Jim is prompting you.
Well, I guess I can.
Okay.
So in some ways, this is a placeholder for moving forward on smart grid. I think we're in the process right now of doing the pilot right now, and part of the reason we're doing the pilot is trying to find where our customers will get advantage out of this program. And I think before we would proceed in future years, we're going to make sure that we're providing benefits to our customers, or in some cases, reducing our costs of operating the system. And I don't believe we'll move ahead unless we can show positive cost-benefit analysis. So I don't think this is an indication we've made a plan to move ahead. We're putting placeholders in case it makes sense to move ahead with this program.
So what you're saying is that until you've done the pilot, that is, I don't see the money in here for the pilot, but I'm sure it's in here somewhere. Is that your continuing appropriation of 737? It's close enough, that's what it says.
Yeah.
Talks about prior year's appropriation.
Correct.
So is that what it's for?
Yeah,
it's for a pilot.
Correct.
Okay.
And we have additional pilots, I think, that we're doing around the smart grid initiative.
Well, then we'll look forward to whether or not it's going to make sense for Palo Alto.
Yes.
Thanks.
Are we going to, along those lines, are we going to receive any kind of update? I know it's a 2-year pilot that just started, I think, in the fall of 2013. Are we going to receive an update on how that's going at some point, maybe the year mark or something like that?
Yeah, if Jane Ratchey's there, I think she'll remind me that we do actually submit in both quarterly and annual updates on all of our utilities initiatives, and that's typically included in there, correct, Jane?
And do we, and I apologize in advance, I have a stack of informational reports waiting for me to get spare time. But is that where those would be, or perfect?
Yeah, at this point, because there's no further action, we've indicated that pilot will run through 2015, and so we just provide regular updates.
Great. So if we don't have any other questions on the electric fund, we'll move on to the fiber optics fund.
Before we do, Chair Berman, it would be great to have a vote on the electric fund separately, and I do have a response to your question which you asked.
Great.
So you asked about on page 350 why did charges to other funds decrease by about $200,000. Palo Alto developed a few years ago the Palo Alto Green program for electric fund, and city funds also participate in this program. Since it was discontinued now, since the electric fund achieved carbon neutrality, this also decreased the cost for city departments.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
And in your motion, if you wouldn't mind, excuse me, to add in that places memo.
Is that where we do this?
That's
perfect.
Correct. We'll have to do it 3 times.
So I'll go ahead and move that we tentatively approve the electric fund. Do I need to specify both operating and capital budgets, or
no? Both will be fine. Thank you.
So tentatively approve the electric fund with the position reclassification mentioned in the App Places memo as the position reclassification.
Under utilities, right?
Under yes, and we'll do it under the electric fund.
Okay, second.
Any questions, comments? Nope. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. So moving on now to the fiber optics fund. Do any colleagues have any questions or comments? And I guess, and we can do first operating and then we can do capital, but we'll just do them both under fiber optics before we move on to the next one.
I would make a comment that it's, I think I need to weave the two in together, and it's something we've discussed before, but under your, under the fiber optics fund, where I don't see the reserves tonight, but where I know that this is happening, I wanted to ask a question about the users of the fiber optics ring, and those in particular, the ones who do the resale. And as I recall, which I can't find right now, you're increasing them about 2.5%. Am I right?
That is correct. It's a contractual agreement between the
right.
users and the city.
Exactly. And is there anything more that we could be doing in that area that would return even more to the city? Said inelegantly, but in other words, are we utilizing that fiber optic circle sufficiently, and could it be looked at more as an enterprise?
Sorry, to give you a little bit of information on the customers, we have Assistant Director Thomas N here in charge of customer services. But I will note that, the revenues from this fund are close to $4.4 million a year. The expenditures are down in the few $100,000 a year. Sorry.
As I recall, it's about $2 million a year that goes into the fund.
And so it's actually, a pretty significant return to the fiber reserves every single year.
And maybe that's better asked that way. Is it a significant enough return? Because my understanding is that it's very advantageous for those who are on the ring.
Council members, my name is Tom Ozen. I'm the Assistant Utilities Director for Customer Support Services. The part of the fiber optic fund that I have is the customer outreach, the marketing effort, and the like. To answer your question, the 2.64% is only related to one of the fiber optic rate schedules, and that's an older rate schedule that has been closed to new participants, and those are on a particularly advantageous pricing structure, which doesn't exist anymore. And so as CPI increases over time, sooner or later, all of those, as they expire, will wind up transitioning to what we will call market-based costs. So that will take care of that.
Remind me how many customers we have in that area.
There are customers, and there are accounts, and then there are connections. So you can have one customer, one account, with multiple connections to multiple businesses, or to multiple buildings, back to the PAX, the Palo Alto Internet Exchange. We are currently at around 273 connections, which is what drives our profitability. That's what we cost on.
Yeah.
We have we're in the process of increasing our connectivity capability at PAX to increase our potential number of connections. We manage the fiber fund, the marketing of the fiber fund, in connection with our capability for construction. So yes, we could increase our marketing, and we could therefore create a larger backlog of construction, which would probably be detrimental to the overall business. But we're not seeing an end point of our marketing yet.
So basically, we're in a nutshell, we're more or less keeping up with demand right now.
Correct.
I'm hesitating to say too much about it, but it's a fascinating area. You're talking about almost 300 customers, some of whom I'm pretty sure are in the resale business. And in addition to that, this makes some money for the city, which is very advantageous. But I doubt that most of the general public knows that this exists, or even that the interchange, the exchange exists. And I think it's absolutely fascinating that we have that within our city limits, because I doubt that many other cities have it.
That is correct. Other cities do have their own dark fiber rings. Silicon Valley Power, the city of Santa Clara, has one. They also have their own internet exchange within their city limits, as we have ours. So that does represent a strategic advantage for us.
Right, yes. Okay, there's no question in there other than to simply say, this is a business, really, that we're running as a city, and it's pretty successful. And I think it's something the public should be aware of. Thanks.
Any questions, comments? You say you do? You don't? No? So let me ask one quick question. I noticed that the budget for fiber optics is going up 26%, but there wasn't, at least on page 363, there wasn't really an explanation of what that $500,000 was going towards. And I was trying to figure that, is that the, and in the presentation you gave to kick us off, Val, there's customer connections for $0.2 million and system improvements for $0.2 million, but can you maybe explain to us a little bit what that is? And forgive me if you did during the kickoff, I wasn't focused on it at that point.
These can be attributed to the salaries and benefits that are increasing with the SEIU.
So you were saying these, so the salary and benefit increases for $200,000, and then there were some other increases for about another $300,000. It looks like.
And then I can, if I may step in, the allocated charges, the increase is significant, this is correct. So we actually looked into this to make sure that methodology is consistent. So what happened in fiscal 2013, there was much more internal support departments provide additional work, whether it's the attorney's office or other internal support departments, to the fiber optics fund. And as the allocated charges get calculated, we also get the actual activity from the last fiscal year which has closed. And that determines the cost of the two next fiscal years, so actually fiscal in 2 years. Okay. So that's the reason why allocated charges went up substantially for this fund. And you do see a 68% increase in that and overall 25% increase.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah.
So this is somewhat of a follow-up to Vice Mayor Niss's questions on the how widely the fiber optic availability is appreciated. Under workload measures, we have number of connections serving individual users. And are those referring to individual residential users or residential and commercial individual users combined?
I believe it's a combination. It's whoever is the customer, and we do have some residential customers with the wherewithal and sophistication to sign up for the service.
Okay.
There's a handful of residential customers. The vast majority is commercial.
And we had seen the individual users climbing in 2012, 13, 14. At a higher rate than we're projecting for 2015. And so it goes to this question, are there opportunities there to sign up more individual users? Are we attractive to folks and they simply aren't familiar enough, or have we saturated those prospective customer sales?
I'd say to some extent, our projections also reflect what we're capable of doing from both the engineering perspective and the operations perspective in connecting customers. So at some point, you know, we could possibly look at a third party coming in to help us, but they have to get familiar with our system. Right now, we are really primarily responsible for designing, engineering, and operating and maintaining the system.
Well, then let me ask a follow-up to that. Given the operating profit that we derive from this, if we're saying that one of the reasons that we aren't signing up more individuals is because we're constrained on our ability to do the capital part of that to hook them up, right? Is that essentially what you're saying? If we increase that capacity, would we make more money?
You know, I suppose we would, but as you know, because we went through the contract audit, we really do have to also, consider what we can do in terms of managing third-party contracts or bringing on more people onto staff. There's that.
So I
tension.
appreciate that there's more management of whatever increase we would have necessary to hook up more customers. My question isn't whether would be a cost increase or a time increase. My question is, would we benefit in the net from investing in that, or would we not? And if we don't have an answer tonight, we can have that as a follow-up when we return, because of course there's an expense, and I accept that at present we have a constraint on the bandwidth that we have to do that. My question is, would it make sense to expand that bandwidth?
Thanks, Pat, because that's really where I was going, and I didn't quite get to the next step, so I would love the answer to that as well.
I might add, I think in this particular case, it isn't necessarily that much of a financial budget issue as a kind of strategic issue. I mean, obviously, if we do want to enhance the expenditures in this year's budget in order to get a higher return on the revenue stream, because that's really what you're saying, is could we spend more money to make more money? I think we could look at what that relationship is, for every new customer, what's the cost if we were outsourcing, and what's the revenue stream that we could get. Obviously, presumably, that's a one-time cost for the most part on the hookup, and then we would, if we keep them as customers, as time goes on, the return gets even better for those customers. So I think we should be able to give you an answer by the time the budget's done.
And then the other dimension to that is what happens under the scenario that we have a fiber to the premise program, and do we cut into the return on our own investment here, or are these customers outside of the impact of that? So I'm fine with having that as part of, I don't know if we've set up a parking lot of items to where staff will come back.
So I'm not sure we'll be able to have a very robust response that quickly. One of the things I think we mentioned is that we are looking at
it's in the initiatives
yeah,
on
it's
358.
Right. One of our initiatives is actually to look at this network plan and to assess, what all is involved in developing it, what the costs are. And so in some respects we don't exactly know yet, and that would hopefully be one of the things that would come out of that assessment.
But I think one of the things we could figure out pretty quickly would be, I don't want to make that it's entirely hypothetical, but just to at least know what the different coefficients were for, again, to add a customer outsourced costs X, what the revenue stream is, what the return is on investment. Just to even know that information, whether we're going to say, well, we want to increase it by 10 more customers or 20 more customers, that can follow that, but we ought to at least be able to answer that question.
And if you don't have that sense, how do you know you shouldn't be cutting back here? I mean, you've got to have some sense of that, or we're not managing that well. So I would like to request that that be something that we have an update when we return to this item later in the budget review process.
Adding on to the request, could you also indicate to us, again, I'm not sure what the balance would be between the resellers, those who use it for that reason, and those who locate here because we happen to have that advantage. And that would be interesting to know. How many of our businesses, how many businesses might look at us and decide they would locate here because we have that, or is that not a significant number?
We'll see if we can tease out the data for that. I'm a little bit doubtful because, some of it is maybe our electric rates. There are probably many components to why customers choose to locate here, but
we'll see. A general
I think
overview.
key account reps may have some sense for how much this is valued by some of the customers.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions? So I'll go ahead and move that we tentatively approve the fiber optics fund.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Nope. Nope. All in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimously. And we'll move on to the gas fund. Any, please.
I think I have just one question here, and that's on page 367. And it's at the top under goal, and it talks about natural gas savings achieved through efficiency programs as a % of total sales. And we were up to 1.4, and this is just half a, 0.5. And it explains why under status. But I'm wondering if there's something that we could or should be doing to try to get more participation in terms of, purchasing efficiency products, gas efficiency projects or products, or have we just kind of saturated that for where we are now? What's the thinking?
Similar to, you would see the same trend on the electric fund, and it has to do with the appliance standards really becoming much more efficient, and we can only claim that difference between the even more efficient appliance today and what we could achieve with some of the rebate programs that we've got. Actually, you see the same trend just because of appliance efficiency.
So that would also say to me then that maybe we've saturated the market for those businesses or larger users who've already replaced their inefficient products, right?
I think, yeah, that's one way to look at it. And I guess in addition to that, you could also say, maybe there's still opportunities to get them to replace things with more efficient equipment, but you can only claim that smaller delta as actual savings under the rules promulgated by the California Energy Commission.
Okay, so we'd have to be uber efficient. Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope.
I would just comment that on your presentation, you do indicate that it's time to implement the Palo Alto Green Gas Program. So go new programs. That's terrific, I think. And I'm glad to see that you reiterated that. And you did that, we did that in April, I'm pretty sure.
Seems like it.
One of those last meetings in April.
They all blur together.
Yes, they do.
So if we have no other questions, I'll go ahead and move tentative approval of the gas fund.
And including that places memo, please, Chair Berman.
Oh, we're going to do that for all the little...
We only have to do for three funds.
Got
That's
it.
correct.
I didn't realize.
That's okay.
You're going to have to keep on reminding me.
I'll keep
Thank
track
you.
of it. Sure.
Including the add places memo.
Thank you.
I have no second. Nobody wants to approve this, but I got a second.
Gotta get those mandates.
One more question.
So same thing, and I presume the answer would be the same, but same thing with gas main replacements and coordination with street repairs or street resurfacing. I presume that that's the same response.
Yes.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed? No. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the wastewater collection fund.
And that is pages 376 to 384 in the operating budget document, and in the capital budget document is 284 to page 305.
Thank you. Do any colleagues have any questions?
This wastewater collection, you said?
Yes, sir. Wastewater collection.
Yeah, I got one.
Yep. Go ahead.
So my question has to do with when we have, I noticed that we have the environmental analysis of the water recycling initiative coming forward. And my recollection is that when we last looked at that, we had problem with the quality of our recycled water, and we traced it to incoming water impurities from the collection system, principally in Mountain View and Shoreline Park, if I understand it right. So first, when we went through that repair system, how does that work? Are they paying for their piping into our wastewater collection that feeds into our plant? And when there's a deficiency, do they pick that up? Or how does that whole mechanism work?
That's correct. The lines in Mountain View would be paid by the city of Mountain View. The plant only, I'm talking about issues I'm not within my control, but the plant has a line that picks it up over by the old Los Altos treatment plant. It all feeds into there, and the line from there down to the plant is owned by the plant itself. But everything before that is owned by the cities that own the system.
So when we find a problem, like what happened there, is it up to us to try to negotiate with our partner agency to get them to fix what we want to have fixed? Or
correct.
We don't have, so do we have actual leverage, or do we have the ability to mandate it, or is it just a cooperative approach that we try to convince them to do?
I'm not the expert in that, but I believe that we have to negotiate with the other agencies to make those repairs. I don't believe we have any mechanism to force repairs. But they've been cooperative. I think Mountain View's been very cooperative in working on these issues.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up when Public Works is here. I think we can get some more specific information from
So
Mike.
just to then give you one of my follow-up questions for when they're here, is should we be looking at quality standards that are negotiated and agreed upon with our partner agencies? Because it's great that they were cooperative, but there's no guarantee that's always going to be the case. And say they have some big expense and they say, you know what, the contract says we don't have to give you water that's not salty. And one of those member agencies could choose to be less cooperative in the future, and we may not have any true leverage, and yet it may very much affect us, especially if we do a big investment to recycle the water. And this is where it becomes a more important issue going forward than it probably has in the past.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's a worthwhile point, since we're going to be in more engaged conversations with our partners anyway, as we know, given the organics plan and the biosolids treatment improvements we'll be needing to make at the treatment plant itself. So
good. And then my other half to the question, we've brought down those total dissolved solids down to in the 700 TDS range or something like that, and we're attempting to get it down toward 600, but I understand it operates in a bit of a range, Tom. And so my question has to do with that final step on our program to bring it from 700 to 800 or wherever we are down to 600 to 700 or wherever we're targeting. How do we get there? And is that part of a capital budget that is within this, or?
So an ongoing part of our sewer systems or wastewater systems is that we look for infiltration, and we're trying to eliminate infiltration into the system. So we do, within the next CIP projects, there's areas in the system where we think we might have some saltwater intrusion that we're going to be repairing. So we work with the plant on them helping us identify locations where we're seeing salts come into the system, and then we work on those systems in the CIP. We're in pretty good shape right now. We've done a lot of repair on our systems over the last 10 years. There's a couple locations we have in the next CIP where we have infiltration that we're looking at.
So how do we monitor and test that? Is there technology that allows us to have a drop line that basically can pick up where infiltration's occurring?
That's correct. They measure for dissolved salts. There's instruments that measure that.
Okay. And the reason that this is particularly important, and I want to make sure colleagues are really thinking about it, because as the city manager said, this is something that's on a horizon. We have, with the progress that we've made in the last several years, we're on the cusp of being able to recycle a major portion of our wastewater for the plan at this time is non-potable purpose, but for irrigation and for toilets or whatever other than drinking water purposes. And long term, this could be a real major transformation in our water supply. So these issues around how do we, not only how do we build off the success that we've achieved in the last several years that has put us in that cusp, and make this financially sustainable? Because when we looked at this 5 years ago, it was a desirable environmental objective, but we really didn't have much economic analysis, and my understanding is it wasn't very favorable economically. Our water commodity cost has now doubled since then and is due to go up another 50%. So compared to 5 years ago to a few years out from now, it will have tripled as a commodity, and now the Santa Clara Valley Water District has offered to partner with us on a capital program to have these recycle lines. And so that leads to my other request that I brought up at a previous Finance Committee meeting, and it may not necessarily be part of this budget cycle, but I want to ask when we could get some analysis of the economic costs and benefits as we look 5 years out from now of being able to sell that recycled water as a commodity to ourselves, perhaps to Los Altos Hills, perhaps to Stanford, who is in very short supply of that. It's what the Searsville whole initiative, or much of that, is about, is their irrigation supply from Searsville. And are we, between having a shared cost on the capital and an increased cost on the commodity, does the value of this water really pencil out? Because people are paying for hetchy water to water their lawns and flush down their toilets. And I'm very interested in that, and we've never seen that number, not in recent years anyway. Previously, we didn't see it because we said it doesn't pencil out, we're doing it for other reasons, and we were doing it at a more limited scale. Now, if we're really looking at having this be a fundamental part of our water supply system, then those are important numbers. I'm not assuming it would be part of the budget wrap-up, but I would like to hear, maybe as part of the wrap-up, and so you don't have to answer tonight, when will we see that at least that cursory analysis, which would be different from the full in-depth analysis that we'd have a later time? Thanks.
Thank you. Liz?
Yeah. So I appreciate that, because I would agree that that's an extremely important route for us to head in the future, and certainly a lot better than my friends who used to drain their washers out onto their garden, which they did. Yeah, that was one of the great ways to recycle. That was the olden days, Mark. So
I remember them well.
Yes. So following up on that, and as far as the environment, one of your initiatives is to investigate and eliminate tree roots in over 300 feet of sewer lines. So, and we did discuss this briefly this morning. I shared something with Valerie and her staff that I won't share tonight about redwood trees, but you could ask me another time. But tree roots are an enormous problem in our city. And you might want to just talk about it a little as an initiative, because invariably somebody says, oh my gosh, we had a backup over the weekend, the tree roots got into the sewer line. Just say something about this as an initiative with those 30,000 feet of sewer lines.
Yeah, the integrity of our sewer lines really does get impaired when tree roots go under, over, or through our sewer lines, and that does result in infiltration of other elements into our sewer system. And that is an important way to maintain the integrity, is to make sure it's cleared of all roots.
So now talking about how do you really do it? So are you going to ride around town and look for tree roots, or are you waiting for people to call in, or what? This is a lot of feet of sewer lines.
So Dean Batchelor, Assistant Director for Operations. So what we're doing is that we're taking a proactive approach. We've looked at the city as a whole, and we've broken it out into basins. So we're looking at 27 different basins that we've looked at. And what we're doing, we're actually going out to every sewer lateral. Because what we have also had in the past, as you've known, is that we've had a lot of overflows right at the connection points. And to reduce those, that we've taken that approach that we actually go out, we actually put a camera inside the sewer line, and we actually take a look and see, and if we need to, then we'll go ahead and treat the sewer line itself. We'll use a cutter, and we'll cut out those roots at that period of time. If it's up in the homeowners association or in the homeowners section portion of it, we'll let them know that, hey, you may want to start looking at this because you're starting to have these tree roots that are impeding into your sewer line. So we are going to go one by one, and that's what we have been doing so far.
And I don't think you'll be suggesting they cut down their trees, but would be tempting, wouldn't it?
It definitely would be.
Yeah,
but
I'd like to cut down a couple of mine, right? Okay, so I think, yeah, I know it is. I mean, it's hard to say it in public. But I really think that's an important thing to do, because that is one of the things. You know, when you hear from the neighbors, you hear about they've just dug up the street that they just repaved, or you hear that they had a backup in the sewer lines very frequently is the tree roots. So thanks for the answer.
You're welcome. Thank you. Karen?
Well, Liz touched on the follow-up I was going to do, because I was reading in here about the ooh, shame. Reading in here.
Well, then it's okay.
Reading in here about the clearing the lines, and because root infiltration is an issue. But we've also seen what, PG&E is doing, what Caltrain is talking about doing, and eliminating trees. So is there anticipation that there would be some trees that you might want to recommend be removed because they're in, places that really are causing real problems? Or what kind of education program, outreach program? Do you look at this as being like a minimal impact on our tree canopy? Or can you anticipate that at this point in time? It's akin to what Liz was asking, but I'm going a little deeper on it because it's an issue.
So I think that the program that Dean just mentioned is really going into the existing sewer line and clearing those sewer lines. It's not destroying any trees. It's not getting rid of any trees. It's really just clearing the sewer line in its current right-of-way. It's just clearing a line.
And it's limited to that. So it's not going further and recommending that there are areas where trees might need to be or should be or ought to be.
Yeah, Tom Marshall, I'll just step in. So our policy, sort of long-term, what we're doing is we're replacing the older lines with newer plastic lines. The reason the tree roots have impact on the old lines is because they're slipped together pipe, and they tend to leak at the joints, which allows the tree roots to then enter into the pipe. So like on new construction, we require them to replace the clay pipes with plastic pipes to try to eliminate the issues with the tree roots. And so that's our policy going forward, is we're going with plastic pipes that are completely sealed, that keeps the water from leaking out, which hopefully keeps the tree roots from entering into the pipes.
Okay, good. So we don't need to anticipate a big outcry from the impacts of this work. So, okay, thank you.
So with that, I'll go ahead and move the tentative approval of the wastewater collection fund. Do I need to do any? No, that's all I'm going to do. I have a second. Any other questions, comments? Nope. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. That passes.
Unanimous.
Sorry, Liz was the second. So that's unanimous, and we'll move on to the water fund. Thank you.
And the water fund is on operating budget pages 385 to 395, and the capital budget pages are 252 to 280.
Thank you. And if any,
I would like to know where the picture is taken, Walter. I couldn't identify it.
On which page, please, Council Vice Mayor?
It's your water fund right there.
13, there you go.
I'll bet you just pulled it off the net.
Turns out it's Monterey. No. Okay. It's a good reminder. So any questions, comments? Or this could be the easiest one yet. Nope.
So one thing is a comment, and this really has to do partly on the communication side. We keep hearing a refrain from members of the community, including at city council meetings, that one of the reasons that we should be very concerned over growth of any sort, commercial or residential, is inadequate water supply. And we know as a council that that's not the reality that we have here, that we've been using less water per capita and less absolute gallonage of water over the last today than we did a decade ago, and that we have a surplus allocation, as well as that Hetch Hetchy has fundamentally changed their water management so that they don't discharge water to run extra hydro during drought years, and as a result they're able to weather long droughts well. And we have voluntary cutbacks, and we're having great response from the community in the voluntary cutbacks, but that's not because we're in jeopardy. And much of the community doesn't know that. And we have explained it, but that with a lot of things that are counterintuitive, and this would be one where the community hears we have a drought, we hear it throughout the state. The fact that Hetch Hetchy customers and Palo Alto are exceptions to that doesn't necessarily register as loud as the broader assumption. And we certainly don't want to discourage. We've got two separate issues. One is whether we want to have our community continue to be proactive in reducing their water use, and even though the cost per gallon may be going up, their water bill will not go up as much as a result. Now, it's not a one-for-one, because we all know that we have fixed costs as well as variable costs in that. But the notion that somehow we're blindly heading over a cliff by allowing residential development because those people won't have water, or the city as a whole won't have adequate water to serve all our residents as a result of that, is something that I hear repeatedly, and I want to find out how we might be able to, as part of that communication initiative that we're looking at in utilities, include this emphasis. How can we really get this message out? Because it's, each year it's a feedback loop. What are the things that our customers don't understand as well as we would like them to understand? This one has, this last year, been popping up a lot more. And it's people in the community who are so-called community leaders who claim to be experts on a bunch of this stuff, and they're clueless on this subject. So how do we make them clued?
Well, I was just going to say that, I think there's a rule of thumb in advertising that people have to hear something at least 9 times before it sinks in. So part of this is just repeating ourselves. We have gone to some neighborhood association meetings where you're catching some of your community leaders and making the points there. So I think that the other thing is that we recently did one of these random surveys we're talking about with the online and telephone calling for the water utility. And as opposed to the anecdotal evidence, because I get the phone calls and emails and things like as many of you do, I was thrilled, frankly, with the results of that survey. In terms of 2 aspects, one is people's general satisfaction with the water utility and their satisfaction with the communication. Were they getting the information, getting enough information? But what I was really jazzed about was their answers to questions like, where does our water come from? What is the cause of water rate increases? What is your level of concern about the drought? some of it I felt like, oh my God, they had some of my, media releases in front of them while they were answering, because yes, you got it. And so this is, between the phone calls and the online surveys, I think we were looking at somewhere north of 2,000 responses altogether. And like I say, this is sort of a random process. So that tells me that, yes, anecdotally, a lot of people are still confused, and I'm not saying the work is done, but I do have some confidence that the vast majority are actually getting the correct
So I
message.
agree with that. And maybe the other dimension would be to have a set of frequently asked questions that address what we see as a certain set of misconceptions, and anytime anyone raises that question with an email to the city or speaking to the city council, we just simply get it to those people.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And we could have something like that on the web.
And all that, yeah.
Okay, we'll make that happen.
Great,
That's
thanks.
a great suggestion.
Thank you. Liz?
Yeah, I think that is such a good idea. And I have heard the same thing. So could we do that, frequently asked questions, and put them online? I missed it, sorry. But I would think that would be, I know everyone doesn't go searching the web, and it's far better if they get to read about it or hear about it. But I think that it's one of the most important messages we need to get out. Although I would say at the same time, having gone through the last drought, people forget there was ever a drought about a year or two later.
You? Karen?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to jump to the CIP again. So there's, where is it here? Water main replacements, and I see that this too is coordinated with Public Works, so thank you for that. Couple of questions. Customer connections. There's a lot of that here.
Which page are you looking at? I'm sorry.
Oh, there's several pages, like a lot of pages, like 277, 78. I think there's more pages than that.
Okay.
So are those connections what causes some of the fresh cuts in freshly resurfaced streets that jut out into the street?
That's correct, because the customer connections, we don't know when they'll come in. So, we can't coordinate those with the street paving, because they could come in 2 days after the street's repaved and ask for a new water service. Or, most new homes now require 1-inch water service because of the new requirement for fire sprinklers in homes. So essentially, all new homes are going to require a new water service, which will cut the pavement to install.
And because it takes a while to get permits and stuff, and this could be just an absolute nightmare, and I appreciate that if it is, but it's not like, Tuesday somebody comes in and they're going to have their water line put in. Is it just really impossible to coordinate these efforts?
It's very difficult. A lot of times the customers will be installing that and the utility won't be installing it, so you're dependent on their contractor to do the installation sometimes. So there's a lot of factors that get involved, and they are very difficult to coordinate because we're coordinating with people we don't really have much control over on schedule.
Okay, appreciate that. Just, it's worth a question. Then the, if I can find it here, I tried to tab it. Reservoir coating improvements, page 270. And if you look at the photo as well, it speaks to what the visual impact is. And these are ones in the foothills. But it says that the design element says may be subject to ARB review. Because these are identified as being in the foothills, why would that not be either planning and transportation or maybe even Parks and Rec? But why ARB? Because these are in, some of them sensitive areas, and certainly within the foothills, you want them to be integrated into the environment, which I would dare say this one, at least if this, I don't know exactly where this one is, it's photographed, but I dare say it's not exactly blending into an environment.
That looks like it might be Mayfield. I think this comment about the ARB review, I think most of these are not going to have any new construction. All we're doing is, and most of these are just relining an existing tank. In some cases, we've had to work in the fenced area around the tanks and remove trees and other things around the tanks. I'm not sure it says ARB ARB review is probably correct. I mean, we do work with the Parks Department, and we do go through a review process in terms of landscaping if we have to take particular elements of the landscaping that's there out and have it replaced, if that helps. But we aren't really typically going through ARB reviews, so I think this is a mistake in the budget book is what I'm telling you.
So maybe that could be replaced with potentially, because it says project may be subject to, could you put there instead of Parks and Rec or Parks Department or something of that nature?
Yeah, or it could be open space or some other, yeah.
Okay, that would be appreciated. I think there was one other one. Oh, this is just a minor one, but just a question here on 272. It's fire hydrant replacement. It says also may be subject to ARB review. What would they be reviewing?
The placement of the fire hydrant.
So they wouldn't necessarily go back where they are now?
Yeah, sometimes they have to be moved. Or they might be in a bad location now and we're having to move it to a new location. So.
Okay. And those projects, are those coordinated with sidewalk replacement and improvements?
I believe they are, but I don't know if I can answer that because typically our operations department is doing the replacements, and maybe Dean could answer that.
Dean Batchelor, Operations Assistant Director. Yes, we do. So when we have to remove a fire hydrant from a corner, like Tom is mentioning, maybe what we'll end up doing is it's in a bad spot, or maybe it's in front of a customer's home or somewhere. What we'll end up doing then is we'll work with Public Works and find out if that sidewalk, or what ended up happening typically is that operations will actually pay for and we'll actually do the work ourselves, and then we'll redo the whole curb and gutter and also sidewalk areas that we replace if we've taken it totally out.
I didn't quite hear, though, that you're coordinating with Public Works schedule to redo sidewalks, too.
Yes, we do. So in the case where if we take out the sidewalk itself or we actually cut the curb or gutter, we'll actually replace it on the expense of operations cost from utilities. But if it's something where it's a joint effort where there's going to be some work from Public Works and ourselves, we do meet on a monthly basis and we talk about sidewalks itself and what kind of work is going to be done in certain areas. So
Okay.
we do.
Okay, all right, thank you. Did you have something?
Well, I was just going to note that even with the CalAV project, we did work closely with, for instance, planning on the sidewalk changes there to coordinate the water utility replacement.
Yes, there you did, and great. Thank you.
Great. So with that, I'll move tentative approval of the water fund with the At Places memo. Yeah. Still no second.
Oh, second.
Got a second. Karen Holman. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That was an aye on the aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Don't. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Chair Berman, before we move on to public safety, I do want to respond to one of Councilmember Holman's questions. You asked initially what's the increase in capital improvement dollars. When we had the actuals in 2013 with $34.5 million, it dropped down and it adopted to $16.8 million, and now we're estimating a higher amount again. So what happens in the city is that when we carry forward through the CAFA, through the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, we carry forward dollars for capital improvements, and so from one fiscal year to the next, and we do spend them in the following fiscal years after they were budgeted. So you sort of see a delay in the spending, and that's why you see the spike in the actuals always higher than the budget.
And I know that happens, and it always is a little bit shocking because, it's not that our staffing changes that much, so it sort of seems like, do we have the staff to be able to manage that big of a spike? So, thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll take a 2-minute break while we transition from utilities to public safety.
Chair Berman, for the police department budget, which is going up first, we're looking at pages 270 to page 283.
Thank you. And does staff have any presentation they'd like to?
Yes, Chief,
there
Chief
you are.
Burns will start.
Hey, Chief. You're hiding over there. It's difficult for you.
Good evening, Chair Berman, members of the Finance Committee, Dennis Burns from the Police Department. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the proposed operating budget for the Police Department for fiscal year 2015. So just a little overview. A lot of this information you probably have heard over the years or generally would have surmised, but the mission of the Police Department is to proudly serve and protect the public with respect and integrity. Purpose is obvious. The divisions are listed up there, but they are field services, and that's another word for patrol. Our uniformed folks in patrol cars. We have about 48 patrol officers, 10 sergeants, and 3 lieutenants. Besides making arrests and enforcing the law, we expect them to engage in problem solving as well as having dialogue and have partnerships with the community. Investigations would be detectives. We have about 11 detectives who investigate a variety of different crimes, primarily broken up into property crimes, which would be burglaries, thefts, auto thefts, and then the other category would be person crimes, which would be robberies, assaults, sexual assaults, murder, what have you. Traffic enforcement, we currently have 2 people in traffic enforcement riding motorcycles. However, we have 2 others assigned on patrol teams that drive patrol cars, but their primary mission is to go ahead and enforce traffic laws. They also investigate accidents, and they also get engage the public in opportunities for education. Police personnel services would essentially be the HR division of the police department. Police department's the only department in the city that it's got its own HR division. And the reason for that is personnel law for public safety is very technical and specific. We do a lot of hiring, we do a lot of testing, and we found that when we control that, we're more effective. We have a lieutenant, an officer, and 2 support staff in that division. Technical services would be dispatch and records. And dispatch, you're thinking about dispatch, we actually have the 3rd busiest dispatch center in the county. And you're probably asking yourself, how could that be, Palo Alto? Please remember that we dispatch police, fire, public works, utilities, Stanford, animal services for Los Altos, as well as Los Altos Hills. So they are a busy group. Parking services is our parking enforcement officers. Actually, they're considered community service officers now. We have 8 of them. They primarily work downtown, but they also work over by the hospital and to a certain degree over in College Terrace. So 8 out in the field, 1 supervisor. In animal control, where we have adoptions, animal control officers, we have a vet, and other services out there. So accomplishments. Proud to say that we received 147 citizen commendations last fiscal year, and that's typically what we get in the 150 range. We've had an overall reduction in Part 1 crimes. Thanks to the benevolence of the council and sharing your council contingency, we're able to purchase 52 AEDs, 12 of which went to patrol cars, which is a great use for them, and we feel very fortunate to have that opportunity to have that great life-saving device in the back of our patrol cars where our officers can deploy them. We had an occasion where I think we deployed one just last week. We participated in a region-wide exercise called Urban Shield, which brings fire, EMS, emergency management, and police all together to work on a variety of different tactical exercises, including hazmat, police, urban search and rescue, and EMS. It's run over a 2-day period, and we're fortunate to work with our neighboring partners on that. Just recently, we implemented our new joint CAD system with the cities of Los Altos and Mountain View. And that's kind of the first phase in a greater virtual consolidation of our dispatch centers, which will create more of a connection between the 3 cities, better information sharing, ability to do border drops, especially on the fire side, and then have the ability to share dispatch personnel in the event of large-scale events. This year, some of our initiatives, and I would say that this is a fraction of them, is the additional phases of the computer-aided dispatch, which we'll be doing with our neighboring cities of Los Altos and Mountain View. I should also include Stanford. But the second part of that is our records management piece. We collect a lot of information, and we want to have the ability to share it together. That will come online probably in late 2014. Next up on that will be a joint 911 system so that we can all be on the same page with 911. We're currently implementing a cloud-based command center, which is an internal information sharing system, which will allow us to have better kind of situational awareness on different cases that our detectives are working, our patrol folks are coming across, so that we can share information. And ideally, that's going to go beyond just our borders, but through our neighboring agencies as well. We finished some enhanced first aid training, which includes purchases of some materials called individual first aid kits, which are designed to stop bleeding and in more severe incidents. We're going to have the ability to begin the Citizens Academy again. We've done that. We haven't done that in about 4 years, just because we haven't had the bandwidth in terms of staffing. Our staffing's improved, and we look forward to beginning that after the beginning of the fiscal year. Police services utilization study. We have that on there. I think that's going to be a stretch for us because we have some of these other projects underway, which to us take priority. Understand the need to do it. However, we think that some of these are more critical and more necessary. But we're certainly open to it. Animal control services evaluation. We're just going to look at opportunity to have some public-private partnerships in the future and see if we can manage the shelter and the operation more effectively. This year, some of the proposals we have is an additional $30,000 for training, leadership training, field patrol, and investigations. We anticipate a fair amount of turnover in the next 4 to 5 years. And we want to be in a position where we've prepared the next generation to be successful in their new positions. We're also going to be looking at having patrol officers have individual cell phones so they can share information. There's actually some liability in having our officers bring their own devices to work and use them, because their devices could be brought in, could be requested by the defense in a prosecution case, and we want to try to avoid that liability. Animal services controls, staffing and reconfiguration, we have to readjust on that, and then also we have to look at our animal control revenue. We're going to have to realign because our revenues are not what we anticipate. That's our presentation. I'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Chief. So I'll kick it open to colleagues if they have any questions or comments.
I'm just interested in the one thing, the cell phone communication. Is this to enhance what you already have? I'm going to presume everyone has a cell phone, right?
We do. There's another feature I probably should have gone into more detail called Mobile Justice and Smart Justice. It's going to essentially allow our police officers in the field to go ahead and access California Department of Justice databases in their hand, as opposed to speaking on a radio or going back to the patrol car or going back to the station. And so we think this is a more efficient way to work. It's going to allow us to be able to increase our tempo and move through investigations quicker, as well as taking some of the load off our dispatchers who are actually quite busy.
Do you issue a cell phone to everyone?
We will. We'll issue a cell phone to each officer. They won't take it home. It'll have some specific systems on it that can only be used when they're in their police officer role.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Because otherwise, I'm sure somebody would say, "You're giving everybody a cell phone?"
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Karen?
A couple questions, please. One of them, oddly enough, is under purpose, is under your purpose paragraph. And it was kind of interesting. It sort of goes with the other question that I have, because, of course, the things that you've listed there are things that would be in the charge of the police department. But I also was kind of curious if there wasn't something mentioned there about creating a safe environment. It didn't seem like that was kind of clearly stated. And in other words, how the police department can have feet on the ground, and you can speak to that however you want to. But, having feet on the ground, being a presence in the community to create a safer environment. So it didn't seem to me like that was kind of addressed there. It seemed to be more in the reactive kind of mode. That said, on page 278, under positions by division, and it has traffic services. And under traffic services, it has, a 53.4% change. But yet, when I look at the FTEs, I don't notice, unless I miss something, I don't notice a change in staffing. So, help me rationalize that.
What you see in here is a reallocation of positions between divisions. So you have an addition in traffic service of 4 positions and a reduction in investigations and crime prevention positions by 2. And the previous page, on page 277, field services, you have a reduction of 2 positions as well. So what happened here on the financial side is that the department reallocated existing positions differently on the financial structure.
And field services specifically is?
Patrol. It's the patrol division. Also accounted for in here is the unfreezing of the traffic positions that you guys did last year. So that's why there's such a dramatic increase in traffic.
Okay, all right. And then Dennis, do you want to speak to my first comment?
I think you bring up a great point, and I think we could reword that better. And I think to a certain degree, we have been more reactive than we'd like to be, given our situation, which is getting better in terms of our vacancies, folks in training, and our folks on injured leave. I think we'll be in a position to be more proactive and, try to anticipate crime. One of the projects we've got working on this year is kind of a predictive policing through the use of analytics. I'm going to deploy that out so that our patrol officers will have the benefit of knowing what the data tells them, and they'll have that ability at their laptop right next to them in their patrol cars. But I think what you brought up is a great point. I think we could say that differently.
And certainly don't take it as a criticism, because I think the police department does a great job. But it's what we say about planning sometimes too. It's very reactive as opposed to proactive, and creating an environment of trust and safety and all of that, and assurance and that sort of thing. So I just want to make sure our focus is where I think it's at least appropriate to have it as one of the kingpin goals of our police department for our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Pat? Chief, you mentioned that we've had an overall reduction in Part 1 crimes. I know that we get fluctuations over the years, and that in recent years with the prison realignment, all the cities in the region saw an upswing over, I guess, over a 2-year period. Do you see this reduction as part of the normal up and down cycle, or are there particular reasons that you would think it's a positive trend?
Councilmember Burt, Ron Watson, the patrol captain. You hit the nail on the head with the up and down swings, and it's interesting, but the way we look at these 5-year snapshots in time, we look at the fiscal 13 number compared to fiscal 8, and in between we've had exactly that, the ups and downs. The 5-year range, in fact, goes from 1,277 to 1880, so it swings back and forth. And even though fiscal 13 was lower than fiscal 8, it is actually probably trending up, and we believe what you said is probably the case. The state measures that are pushing more prisoners back to the localities, we're seeing repeat offenders or offenders that aren't getting the sentences and the service that they used to get before, where they were put away for longer. So we're seeing this particularly heavily in things like auto burglaries. Auto burglaries in the past 2 years are at their highest levels that they've been in some time. And auto burglaries are something where it's quick cash or quick electronics, where people can go out and trade those for narcotics. And those are the types of offenders now that are not getting put into state prison or not even getting put into the county jails for as long as they used to be. So if I had to predict the future, I think in some areas we are going to continue to see some increases in the coming years because of the realignment.
Thanks. And then, Chief, you mentioned that under the AEDs you had a deployment just last week. It's good to hear that kind of anecdotal feedback. How much do they get used, and when we're seeing them used, how often do we think, in the absence of having them in a vehicle, we'd have a real different scenario?
I'll start to respond to your question, then I think Captain Watson will probably chime in. I think we've probably used them since they've been in the cars perhaps half a dozen times, and including literally the weekend that they were first deployed. I think patrol officers actually saved a guy. He was transported to the hospital. So it was a great outcome. So I think having them, it's a great tool. And again, we feel very, very fortunate to have them in the patrol cars. I'm sorry, the second part of your question was?
Well, in those circumstances where we do deploy them, how often are they making the difference between a patient surviving and not?
I think in roughly 2 of the 6 cases, we've deployed them. Sometimes when we deploy them, as you recall, there's a monitor that measures what's the cardiac activity. And in some of the cases, it's told us, don't shock the person. And so we don't. And but I believe at least in 2 of the cases, it's assisted in bringing the person back.
Great. Last year, we had a proposal to increase the school resource officers, and we came back and said we would support that provided that the schools shared the cost. I don't think we actually heard the feedback that they had agreed to. I'm assuming that occurred because I think those officers got increased. Is that the case?
Yes. So last year, I think about this time, there was this discussion. I think there was a lot of interest in the Finance Committee and the Council, and they wished to reinstitute the second SRO. There was a lag there, but eventually we had an agreement, and I believe actually around March, we had the second SRO come on board. His name's Ben Lee. It was a great job. I believe next week or the following week, the actual agreement will be coming back to the council for your approval and signature.
Great. And then you spoke about the need to have a greater revenue recovery in the animal control. And this was a big issue as we went through kind of restructuring and reform in our animal control services 2 years ago, right?
Yes.
And so that had a great deal of public discussion at the time. This seems like it's just coming through and saying we're just going to have some adjustment. And is there a point at which there's going to be a deeper discussion on this, or what's up here?
So we're in the process at the staff level I mean, we had to put the budget together, but we didn't have a completed kind of recommendation. So we had to acknowledge the problem because if you recall, and I don't remember exactly, Ian, the council's motion actually had some specific performance benchmarks by certain periods of time as to where we get, and we're not there. So we definitely do have to bring back ultimately some recommendations to the council as to how to redress this.
Okay.
And if I might, there's also a colleague's memo ready to go to bring forward some a proposal and some notions around that same topic.
Okay, great. And then I had to chuckle, this cloud-based command center. I take it that our community is not going to get confused and there's no voice of God coming out.
Oh, no, there is.
Like that.
Please put that down.
Okay.
It's not the drone program either, yeah.
I just asked the chair if I could tell a really quick story. When my ex and I first moved to California, I was sitting at the corner of something across street to University, and I was sitting there waiting for the light to change, and it was a voice of God. I was sitting there. I'd moved here from Dallas, and I was sitting there patiently waiting for the light, my right turn signal on, and there's this voice behind me coming from a police car saying, "In California, you can turn right on red." It really was a voice from above. Funny. It was embarrassing what happened.
So a couple of quick comments. The first is following up on Pat's comments and Captain Watson's confirmation. I don't know if you guys already are, but make sure to let our state legislators know about the impacts that realignment's having, and on crime in Palo Alto, and the direct ties that you think exist between realignment and the increase of types of crimes that we're seeing. I was in a meeting with Senator Hill. I can't remember. I think it was part of the Santa Clara League of Cities or something like that, where that was the topic of conversation. And it was because the Santa Clara County League of Cities was supporting a bill, I can't remember the number of it, in Sacramento to increase funding for local public safety agencies due to realignment and some of the increases in crime that we're seeing. So I think both Assemblymember Gordon and Senator Hill would benefit from that information. You might already be sending it to them for all I know. I think that the addition, the reintroduction of our traffic team is a great thing that a lot of our residents really support and appreciate, and so I know we're all excited about that. Chief, you mentioned predictive analytics and a plan to start using that, I think, on our patrol teams. Is that something that came out of our new relationship with our largest downtown employer, or is that something separate from that?
It's actually separate from that. There's a company called Predpol, and we'd seen the product. It's been used in Santa Cruz. Actually, I think it was featured on Time Magazine, the front page, in fact. And we saw it, and we thought that we should explore it, and we should look at what the numbers tell us. And a lot of the information it may give us might be things that people could already go ahead and come to that conclusion, but we think it's a tool. It's not panacea, but a tool and something that we should use, especially when we don't see as many, we may not have all the officers we'd like at that time. Can we be more efficient by using the information?
Yeah, that's great. I think that's and when are we going to start using that tool?
We've rolled it out. We have a couple teams testing it right now, and we'll see how they do. Probably they'll make some recommendations, and we'll probably have a full implementation sometime this summer.
Very cool. Thank you. Those were all the questions or comments I had.
Two little ones.
Go for it.
We talked earlier with utilities about workforce. Do you want to make some comments about that? Because we understand that that's always a challenge, and that when you advertise, you don't get as many as they do in the firefighters area.
Sure. So actually, when we kind of have rolling admissions, if you will, within the police department, we don't do it on a time-based process. We allow folks to go ahead and apply year-round, and then we try to send them to the academy based on when we get them through the process. Actually, we do okay with with our input number, the raw number. And I think we did some numbers recently, and we saw 3,300, 3,132 online applications for the position of police officer. And this is over 3 years. And out of that, we ultimately hired 19. And so a lot of people applying. I think a lot of people, when we send them, one of the first things we do is we send them our background investigation form. And it talks about things that they may or may not have done over their life. And I think it scares them. And a lot of them don't.
And that winnows the group out in a hurry?
It does. It does. And I'll be honest, I think we look for a certain kind of individual who's, some of the applicants that we turn away might do a great job somewhere else, but I think we have a good sense of what we'd like here and what the community likes. And, somebody who's mature, flexible, good communicator, understands the big picture, those things, we really value those things. And so it is hard to find as many as we'd like. Now, going back to the actual numbers, right now we have 5 people on workers' comp. I think 4 of them are relatively short-term, should be back pretty quick. We have 5 people in training in the building. They're just in training. 2 people in the police academy, and 3 vacancies. So, but that gives us kind of, we're essentially down about 15 bodies. But we make it work. Folks do a really good job.
And the other aspect of that, which we also discussed about earlier, because obviously you hired the best and the brightest, other people often like the best and the brightest. How are you doing with the recruiting from other cities issue? Yes, retention. Said more elegantly, as Karen just did.
So I'm sorry, if your question is how are we recruiting from other agencies?
Yes.
From time to time
Said
we lose.
less elegantly.
From time to time we lose people to other agencies. We try to keep them here. We realize that it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to keep our employees here than have them walk out the door. And we actually did some numbers years ago talking about how long it takes and then how much money it costs of indirect and direct costs. It's very, very expensive. And we'd like to keep the ones we have and recruit some other ones from some other agencies or entry-level folks and keep them for their entire career. And I think they can enjoy a great opportunity to work in a world-class city.
Well, I'm going to guess then that the retention problem is one that's perhaps less than in some other departments.
If you're comparing us to a much larger metropolitan city in our county, I'd say yes.
Yes, okay. Thanks. Again, an elegant answer.
Just one quick comment, because I think it's worth noting, and it's on page 275, I underlined this earlier, and then forgot to mention it. It's under Police Department response times. I just wanted to congratulate you because you and the force, because percent of emergency calls responded to within 5 minutes. In 2012, it was 78%. 2014, 90%, you're estimating 90%, and have that as a continued goal for this next year. And the same thing with urgent call response time. And if you read under status, it talks about urgent average response time. I really did need to bring my glasses tonight. Average response time for emergency calls was 4 minutes 57 seconds in 2013, more than 30 seconds lower than the national average. And when you consider how much seconds count in situations like this, and then the urgent call response also is under the 8-minute average. So just congratulations to the department, and thank you for that kind of service.
Thank you.
And for keeping that goal out there that high. Thank you.
So I'm going to follow that up with one last question. I noticed on page 277, the revenues table, other revenue is decreasing 50% from last year, and has decreased even more from 2012 and 2013. Is that, I don't think that's animal services. I would wonder, I would think that might be charges for services.
Actually, the way it's categorized, Chairman Berman, it is animal services.
It is animal services.
Yes.
There we go. Then never mind. Thanks. Any other questions, comments? So with that, I will move tentative approval of the police budget. Should we do them individually, or just do the public safety all at once?
Yes, please. Police, fire, and OES individually.
Great.
Please.
So I'll move tentative approval of the police budget. Seconded by Karen. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. So that passes unanimously.
I wanted to think about it a while.
Did you?
Yeah.
Too bad. Moment's gone. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
All rise.
All rise. All right. So I'll let Chief Nickel, if he plans to kick it off with a presentation.
Good evening. Yes, Eric Nickel, Fire Chief. I do have a brief presentation with a couple of slides. Representing the fire department, department overview. In terms of our mission, as part of the department's strategic planning process in this last year, we did change our mission statement. We are a professional team of men and women dedicated to safeguarding and enhancing the lives of anyone, anytime, anywhere with compassion and pride. The purpose of the organization, while we do have a very nice statement here, it could be summed up as we exist to serve the community. Our vision is to prevent harm, reduce the community's risk, be professional. We've got 4 major service programs, and one of the ones I'll probably spend a few more minutes on, and you probably will have some questions this evening, but the questions are probably best when it comes up with the Development Center, and that has to do with the Fire Prevention Bureau for budget purposes being moved over to the Development Center ledger, while the reporting responsibility will still remain with fire. For budget purposes, it is being transitioned over to the Fire Prevention Bureau, and Walter can probably detail that, as well as Peter in their presentation next week, and I will be present for any questions that may come up during that conversation. But we have 4 major programs. The largest one is the fire suppression program. So that provides 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Fire engines, 1 ladder truck. So we have 6 engines, 1 ladder truck, and then in the summertime or during fire season, which is now extending to springtime and wintertime, the seasonal fire station up at Foothills Park. The emergency medical services, paramedics, EMTs, the ambulance program. Now, it's important to note that while there are 2 distinct divisions, the personnel are very efficient and they are trained in both capacities. So essentially you're getting 1 person that does 2 jobs. That's a firefighter, but also a paramedic, an engineer, and also an EMT. And then the Prevention Bureau I discussed, so they are moved over to the Development Center, have been over there for about a year physically. They do all plan checks, all fire investigations, all annual community risk reduction inspections, mostly geared towards businesses, and then of course any fire investigation. And then our last large service program is in our employee fire certification training program. So firefighters at a minimum with state mandates and annual continuing education requirements to maintain their professional licenses for EMTs and paramedics are required to do upwards of 300 hours of training per year just to maintain current certifications and to keep us in compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations. In particular, hazardous materials, confined space, basic firefighter operations, and the like. So our accomplishments in this last year, we responded to 150 fire incidents, which I'm glad to say is down from the previous year, with 82 of the responses within 8 minutes, which is a much higher number than what we've seen in the past. What we are seeing, and you've heard me talk about this before with our aging community, our medical calls continue to increase, and I would expect that that number will continue to go up as our residents live longer and medicine is allowing people to live longer with chronic conditions. 4,712 medical rescue calls, 91% of those calls within 8 minutes, and 99% of paramedic calls within 12 minutes. And if you go back to the conversation we had when we were talking about EMS fees last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, those numbers are significantly better than the other ambulance provider and numbers that we see within Santa Clara County. We were very excited and humbled to assist the police department and public safety in the work that they did with the deployment of the 52 AEDs. The fire department specifically took on the role of doing the education as well as doing the ongoing maintenance, and you'll see that budget item within our budget to maintain the defibrillators so they are always available and ready. We believe that we can pick up the routine inspections on those defibrillators as part of our ongoing fire inspection programs where we're typically in buildings trying to make sure fires don't occur. We deployed a 3rd ambulance company this year, and we did that by increasing the efficiency with the crew. We didn't add positions. What we did is we cross-staffed, so 1 3-person all-risk engine company also staffed a 2-person paramedic unit. Now that unit was only pressed into service when the first 2 singularly assigned paramedic units that didn't cross-staff anything were committed. And what the challenge that we have here in town, we truly are a tale of 2 cities from the fire chief's perspective. We are a daytime city that borders 200,000 people, where it is not uncommon for the fire department to have a surge volume of calls, 5 to 6 calls that might occur for service within 5 minutes. And we will completely deplete our resources during these daytime business hours. If we had to staff a fire department based around our daytime population, we're probably a 13 or 14 station department. Clearly, that's not going to happen, nor do I suggest that. I just point that out that we are a very different city because people create calls for service. One of these challenges that we've had with the county ambulance provider and being the only fire department in the county that does provide the ambulance service, we are trying to minimize, if not completely eliminate, our reliance of the county ambulance to come in here on these surge calls, which is why we're trying to cross-staff these ambulances. The other thing we did this year, we completed, for the first time probably in quite some time, a strategic planning process within the fire department, and we started with the community first. We engaged 40 community members. We invited about 90. We had 40 community members tell us what they thought the fire department should be doing. They gave us some very good feedback, and then the internal stakeholders, the firefighters at all ranks, all levels, all divisions, took that information and built a strategic plan around that. So a lot of these things that you're hearing me say are really an outcome of implementing key recommendations from the 2011 Fire Service Utilization Study. So we continue to implement those recommendations that were made by TriData back in 2011. So moving forward to some of the initiatives for 2015. We do not do a very good job of reporting on our performance. About the only performance that you can see that we do is our budget. When people have asked me, Chief, how many calls did we run last week? Oh boy, I'm going to have to check that and let me get back to you. How many calls for service did we run where we transported somebody to the hospital in an ambulance with IV in place? Oh boy, I'm going to have to call Larry down in PD and get that data. We do not do a very good job of reporting our performance. So under the leadership of our Strategic Initiatives Manager, Amber Cameron, she's taking on a performance measuring process for us that our goal is to have the first quarterly fire department performance in your hand or in your board packet or your packet as an information item. We want to do that quarterly, and the goal is to get that first one to you in late September. We started a culture assessment survey within the fire department designed to measure and support a successful fire department culture, and that work is underway right now and will carry forward into the fiscal year 14-15. It's a very new day in the fire department. New people, new leaders. The old leaders that were here in place 2008, 2009, 10, 11 are no longer with the organization anymore. They've retired. We have a whole new group of people that are looking to chart a new direction, and that's really an important undertaking in terms of the culture, diversity, and inclusiveness training that we're doing. Under the leadership of our two deputy chiefs, Gio Blackshire and Catherine Capriles, we will be implementing an all paramedic all the time program. So currently right now we have paramedics on all of our engines and ladder trucks about 75 to 80% of the time. Our goal is to have that to be 100% of the time. So typically a fire engine and that all risk closest fire engine will arrive at 5 to 6 minutes. Our average response time is about 5.5 minutes, whereas the paramedic unit might not get there until 8 or 9 minutes. So that allows us to deliver paramedic level care 3 to 4 minutes faster. It also allows us to have a region-wide automatic aid agreements with our two neighboring agencies. So no matter where the emergency calls for service occurs, the closest unit, no matter what name it says on the side of that apparatus, is going to be dispatched to the call. We can't do that right now with EMTs on the fire engines because both of our neighbors are required to have paramedics go to their calls. So that's going to open up and probably improve some of our response times just by virtue of having the closest resource that is available at that time respond to the call. Again, as part of the EMS improvements, and again, this comes right out of the TriData study of really focusing the culture and the emphasis of the organization on EMS. We're planning a 4th cross-staffed ambulance in early 2015. This will not require hiring any new personnel. This will be one company that already exists in a fire station of 3 people, having a second unit that they're responsible for. And when the call for service comes, if it requires a fire engine, that's what they take. If the call for service comes and it requires an ambulance, that's what they take. The goal with that is to reduce that county ambulance response, which we've made some great progress. So when I first got here, county ambulance was responding into Palo Alto about 70 times a month, which was almost 1/3 of our call volume. We've reduced that down to about 15 times a month, and our goal is to get that number down to about 5. So we're working with county EMS, we're working with our labor group, and our training to get that all implemented. One of the other things that we're doing as part of our performance metrics, we are undertaking an independent analysis and assessment of the services that we render right after we render them. Now, this differs from the auditor's report that will look at the entire community, whether or not they used our service or not. We want customer feedback on an ongoing basis, and we want somebody outside the organization to do that for us. That is another performance metric that we can report back to you on a regular basis, that 95% of the community thought that in the last quarter that we rendered excellent service with EMS calls. Those types of things. We currently aren't able to do that now, but we will be doing that shortly. So some of the significant budget proposals that we're proposing for your approval this year, I think it's important to note that while we have a few items on there, and some of them do have some large numbers attached to them, because we did make some changes with our BLS ambulance program, which was being very underutilized. We were running very few calls, and it was not cost effective. We eliminated that program middle of last year because we were able to provide a higher level of service with our paramedics when that third ambulance went into service middle of last year. So before any of our proposals, we're actually returning about $500,000 to the general fund. So a couple things that we're looking to do, and another thing that I think is important to note, that we've also done a very good job in the fire department of increasing some of the revenues, both on the EMS side, now that we're capturing more of those calls instead of the county ambulance provider, and then certainly out of the development center and the fire prevention bureau has done a much better job of capturing additional revenue. We're asking a nominal amount of money to replace old and worn out equipment and to support the delivery of a new ladder truck, which really will be a regional all hazards ladder truck. The truck is in California. We expect to have it physically here at the MSC within the next month or so, and we'll have a big ribbon cutting because it will be the only time that any of us will buy a truck. They usually last 20 years, so we want to celebrate that with the community. We've asked a reclassification of one existing captain position to that of a battalion chief and a training battalion chief specifically. So it took me about 6 months to realize this, but we have a fire department of 120 individuals, many of whom are retiring, that are required to do all these training mandates, and we had 0.5 of an FTE of a training officer for 120 people. We actually shared our training captain with utilities. So we're proposing taking one of the existing captain positions and reallocating that to be a battalion chief. And what I need from that battalion chief is that strategic big picture view, because I think Ian can correct me on the numbers. I believe we have 17 members that are eligible to retire right now. I just received 2 retirement notices today from 2 captains who will retire at the end of June. So we have 17 that can retire right now. We have another 32 that are eligible to retire in 5 years or less. So almost half the sworn force of the department is eligible to retire in 5 years or less. So we are really ramping up that succession planning, succession management, and I need a training officer, a battalion chief that can do it and set the strategic course to replace half the organization, many of whom are key management personnel in 5 years. And of course, with all that, we have to hire new employees behind that. So that's another key thing that the training officer will do. We are having ongoing discussions, in particular with Mountain View, about regionalizing some key components of the fire department: training, hazardous materials response. So because of the new CAD system and the new closest unit dispatch, we are running with Mountain View on a daily basis. Either we're running a call into their jurisdiction or they're running a call into our jurisdiction, we need to train to the same standards. So again, our training official would work with their training captain and training battalion chief and put together a comprehensive sort of regional approach to training. The public education position that we're asking for is an hourly part-time position. And this, you've heard me talk about this a couple times before, but I think this position really came to the forefront of my priorities with that tragic fire we had in Embarcadero back in January, where we had 2 elderly gentlemen perish in a home fire that was entirely preventable. We have the opportunity to educate very components of our people in our community who are at risk. And at risk in the fire world is anybody age 65 and over. And if you look at the data, the risk for them of dying from either a medical emergency at home or a fire at home increased significantly. This position is going to be specifically targeted towards reducing that risk in these communities, in the elderly communities, working with other community partners and finding ways that we can creatively and aggressively reduce risk, keep people independent, keep them in their homes. So, and then the last piece is the leadership and the succession planning requests, and this is really to bring in outside classes and to support some of our employees that are getting certifications at either a fire captain level or a chief officer level. So kind of the net sum of all our requests, we're still refunding back about $128,000 into the general fund. So that completes my my probably not so short presentation. Sorry. I'm available for questions.
No, that's great. Thanks, Chief. Open up to colleagues. Any questions or comments?
I want to mention how professional you are, all of you. And it's very important in this community. And it isn't always true with fire departments everywhere.
Thank you.
So I particularly appreciate your ability to present it and present it well. And, you know, to be returning something to the general fund as well is always commendable. But I'll ask you the same thing I did to the police chief. You are going to have to replace these people. That is a huge job. And tell us a little more about that, because it clearly is front and center, and you've got people resigning, maybe not right and left, but 2 today is quite a few. Retiring, yes, wrong word. But I do understand that lots of people would like to work for the Palo Alto Fire Department.
Yeah, and I think there's I have much the same challenge that Dennis has. We have a community that expects a lot from their public safety, expects a lot from all their city employees.
Even their city council.
From all of us. So let me give you some numbers from our last hiring, because I think it tells a story that while there may be a whole lot of people that want a firefighter job, they're not going to be successful in this community or this environment. So we recently, we have 7 new employees in the academy right now. They're about halfway through. It took us about 6 to 8 months to do the recruiting. We did some very aggressive recruiting because we are trying to increase our diversity within the department. And we did a fantastic job. These 3 chiefs and management staff sitting behind me put in so many hours, along with many other firefighters within the department, to try to go out and recruit the right people. Tons of hours, tons of work. With that, we had 1,154 people apply. Of that 1,154, 600 of them were eliminated because they didn't follow basic directions in filling out the application. So I don't think that those people would be successful in this community if you are not smart enough to fill out a basic job application. So now we're down to about 550 that we're looking at. We worked with HR and put in some a question that they had to write. We wanted to see if they were good writers because we do reports on every call that we go on, and we wanted to know a couple things from this. Can they work in an environment with high expectations, and do they have a passion for customer service? So that narrowed it down to about 150 that we interviewed. I think we actually interviewed 170. And of that, we took 12 to background. And of that in background, we lost 2 because they had things in their background that we could not hire them for in public safety. So that was a combination of EMTs and paramedics. With this all paramedic all the time, that really starts to narrow your pool of who you can hire. There are probably 200 paramedics in the state of California right now that we could aggressively go after and hire. Not a whole lot. You haven't even heard me say diversity yet. When you start talking about numbers like this and trying to have a workforce that is representative of the community, it is very challenging. And I think there's some things around workforce and retention that are really important to the fire department. And while you see some of them reflected here in the budget document, this is a conversation that will continue to come up, particularly from the union side. So it's not this huge. Now, yes, there's a lot of people out there that want to be a firefighter, yeah, but there are very few people that can be a successful firefighter with the city of Palo Alto. So we are in competition. Now, you want to talk about retention. We've lost 4 people to other agencies here in the county in the last 3 years, and I have 1 in process with another agency right now. So, and these are fairly new employees. So it is very challenging. I mean, it's challenging enough alone when Ian shows this giant graph of red, yellow, green of who can leave. I can't afford to lose people that we've just hired and invested $50,000 or $100,000 in to go to another agency. That's the challenge. That makes it even harder.
Good. Thank you for that really comprehensive answer. And my only question back would be, why don't you do background earlier? I mean, what was it that that you got to that last 12 and said, now we'll do background?
Well, it's been traditional in the fire service process that you go through backgrounds are very expensive. So to background 1 employee, you're investing several $1,000s. It may take $5,000 to $10,000 to do a thorough background, which includes medical, psych, and then a law enforcement background.
So you're doing a really comprehensive background on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Karen?
Yes. I had the same question about why background checks don't happen earlier. But you would think with so much available online now that it wouldn't be that expensive to do, but it really is, huh?
It is. If you're going to do a background investigation properly, you need to visit where they live, knock on the doors of the neighbors, do the credit check, look at their online profile, if they allow it, look at criminal activity, look at any sort of orders that law enforcement might have given people to stay away from other people, those types of things. That all takes time. And there are folks out there that do it. A lot of them are retired police officers that do the background investigation.
These are like in-home visits for sports recruits, plus.
But I mean, when you think about it, if we are invited into people's most intimate times in their lives and intimate place in their homes, and the last thing I want is somebody saying, well, you stole from me or you were inappropriate.
Oh, sure.
I mean, so we are going to take extra time to make sure that they're really, really clean.
Sure, of course you are. I did have a couple of questions. I don't know if I'll be able to find them right offhand, but maybe I can. I think it's on page 256. Under revenues, permits, and licenses, and those were down like, my gosh, they've just plummeted. And which I don't understand why that would be. And under positions by division, environmental safety management also is down quite significantly. And I guess the question that got raised for me, and there was another place that caused me to have the question, is wherever else I read it. Anyway, is about checking buildings, safety inspections of buildings and facilities. And so the permits and licenses, why is that down so much? And is that related to?
Simple explanation.
Yeah, please.
So it's basically the transfer of revenues and expenditures and positions from the fire department to development services. And you'll see an equal change on the development services side.
When we get to it.
When we get to it, correct.
Looks good for me. It looks dramatic for development services.
That's what I thought initially. I was like, wow, you guys are doing this? No, it's just transferring.
But to answer the second part of your question, I would direct you to page 249 and look at the third bullet point down under accomplishments last year. And I did not touch on this, but one of the things that was concerning about last year's presentation is our fire inspections had significantly decreased in last year. And we actually saw a slight increase, I believe, in fires. But this last year, we did almost 2,100 fire inspections, many of these business occupancies. So that's a 62% increase from fiscal year 2008, which I think was our established baseline.
So it's only, I remembered reading it somewhere, but it's not in a table anywhere, or a chart anywhere to track it that way.
It is in the SEA report, but for the budget, it's the way it's presented here is under accomplishments.
Yeah, okay. Maybe easier to track it if it was in it.
I agree with you. I'm looking actually in development services, whether we're capturing it there already, but this would be a very good workload measure to put into the budget. What is the anticipated number of inspections we do annually?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
we'll do this for next year for the adopted budget.
And not only the number of inspections, but also the number of corrections.
Okay.
Or code enforcement, actions that have been taken. It'd be helpful to know that.
I assume we can track that. We're tracking this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I think a lot of that gets back to our performance reporting that we do once a year. In a lot of cases, this will show up in a quarterly report.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you can get it in this report, that would be great. So let's see. Hang on a second here. I had a couple other things highlighted here. You can welcome to go to Pat if you have any questions.
I'll just note one comment. The chief said that we have a daytime population of 200,000.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you, but
glad to hear that.
Last week we had a consultant who claimed that we were a daytime population about 155, and he had certainty on his info, and it came from our staff, and I was perplexed by that. So
I remember that dialogue. Sorry to insert me in the middle of it.
Just rubbing it in.
Yes. Right here, 250. Yeah. Pat and I were both taking notes.
The fire chief says.
Yeah. I think that, to be congratulated on getting the overtime down. I think that's a congratulations, and also on your response times. I think those were my questions. Yeah, I think those are my comments. Thank you.
So I just want to.
One more. I'm sorry.
Yep, go for it.
One more, which is on page 253 under goal. So under goal and then objective, and then the ratings. So in 2012, the citizens' ratings was 96%, then it went 93 and 90. So why is the goal just 90%? Why isn't the goal like 93% or something? Why aren't we shooting for a higher satisfaction rate? It's not that you're complacent, but
I don't disagree with you. I think it should be higher. I'm not certain how the numbers were set.
So, yeah, because, we're maintaining the fire prevention services. Those numbers are consistent. We're not striving for more, but at least they're consistent and they're higher. The other has tracked down, and we're kind of seem to be complacent on that lower number of 90%. So
That daggone low 90.
I know. Hey, we're
We're in
over.
Palo Alto, I understand.
We're
90
over.
doesn't get you anywhere.
We're overachievers. we're overachievers.
Well, I think
But
one of the
if we've
things
been
that
there, you know what I'm saying? If we've been there,
one of the things that you're going to see when we start the quarterly reporting is you will see these trends much earlier. And these will be actual people that we rendered service to, not somebody's perception of do they think we're excellent or not. Because I have no idea this number, or any of these, did we have contact with them? Were they calls for service? I don't know that.
oh, I understand that. But just as a goal, from from your perspective, as a goal, it seems to me it should be trying to get back up to the 96, because the department does excellent work. So reflect that in your goal. It would seem to me.
Okay.
Now, if we adjust it upward and you don't meet the goal, we'll have to blame.
Blame me.
Okay.
Councilmember Holman, I'd just like to talk quickly about the overtime question you had, or the comment. It is true that the overtime budget is lower. However, we are trending this fiscal year, as reported to the committee at mid-year, a little bit higher than above budget. This trend will still continue primarily through vacancies, which the department had, and workers' comp issues, people on workers' comp, but there will be no exceeding of the entire salary and benefits budget for the fire department. It will still be within existing allocations.
Speaking of workers' comp, Walter just reminded me, I mean, how are we doing on that right now? I think last time I heard we had 8 people out, I think, which was on the higher end of what we wanted. Have we managed to
I'm getting 5.
Okay, and last time I asked if there were any kind of trends that we were seeing, and I don't think there were, but do we have any sort of ideas to kind of why so many folks are getting injured and things, any areas for improvement?
The injuries were kind of all over the map. The only trend that I can tell you that is typically seen in public safety is the older the employee or the older the organization, the greater the chance for a workers' comp type of injury. With 40 plus people that are eligible to retire in 5 years or less, this is not surprising that we have these types of numbers. The other trend, part of body, it was, again, all over the map.
Yeah. Okay. Let it be noted, I did not say that. So I just want to commend you guys. I mean, first of all, thank you for the presentation. Incredibly thorough and impressive, and I'm excited about the focus on kind of performance metrics. I think that'll only lead to more improvements. On a totally different track, I love the community first attitude. I love the movie nights that you guys are doing at the fire stations. I saw a notice about one of them, and unfortunately I was out of town. I'll have to figure out when the next ones are are happening, and maybe I can swing by. I also happen to like the movie that you guys were showing that night, so I was bummed to miss it. But I think that's a cool thing for the community to be able to come by, and the kids in the community to be able to spend a couple hours in the fire station. That'll make their week. So I think that's really great.
Well, the neat thing about that is the firefighters take it on themselves. And when you heard me say earlier, it's a new department, it's a new day, they initiated it. This was not driven by anybody with a gold badge on or cross bugles. This was truly the firefighters in the station wanting to figure out a way to connect with the community in a way that is not related to running an emergency call. So
and that makes it even
it's
cooler.
really the firefighters.
Yeah, and that kind of dovetails with my next comment, and going to your stressing the high qualifications that we have for firefighters in our community, and the fact that firefighters are with us at our most vulnerable times. And I'd forgotten about it, but I mean, you're so right. And I saw that when I did my ride along too long ago, and I should do another one of those also. But I was blown away by the I'll call it the bedside manner that our firefighters had with folks that they were treating on medical emergencies. It's the kind of stuff that you wish doctors had that they never do, in terms of just their attentiveness to folks was really impressive. And so it makes sense that we're ultra vigilant about who we bring onto our force. So That's all the comments I had. Any other questions, comments? So I'll go ahead.
Hit the motion.
Move tentative approval of the fire budget.
Second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Niss. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Not at all.
Not at all. Thank you very much.
And Chairperman, now we have the last budget for tonight. There's no presentation, just questions opening for council on the Office of Emergency Services, pages 263 to 269.
Great. Thank you very much.
And there are no significant budget proposals either. There's just, we're rolling over the same budget. It's just slightly higher costs to the salary benefits and other costs.
You guys are keeping it easy on us. So I'll kick it off then immediately to colleagues if they have any questions or comments. For Mr. Duker, who's here.
Just commendations. I know what you do. You do it well, and it's terrific.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor and Honorable Chair and members. Ken Duker, DUEKER, Director of Emergency Services for the City of Palo Alto. Yes, we've economized so much we don't even afford, we can't even afford PowerPoint. So I want to just make myself available for any questions and acknowledge your support of what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.
Great, thanks.
Just one question.
Yeah.
It's just one question, and it's not even really a budget question. It is what I highlighted here under your, on page 265, under goals and objectives, goal 1. And it talks about emergency management cycle, mitigate, prepare, respond, recover. And just if you'd care to comment at all on the coordination you have with Utilities Department on getting the second power source?
Absolutely.
Redundant power source?
I'll address the best management practice, which is the cycle, and then I'll address your utilities comment. So the evolution of emergency management is really punctuated kind of like evolutionary equilibria, if you will. Katrina was one of them. 9/11, of course, is one of them. Essentially, the focus in modern best management practices for disaster and emergency management has moved to make sure that we explicitly acknowledge the preparation mitigation phase as well as the recovery phase. Heretofore, most of the exciting stuff was really geared towards response. And while that's important to get right, communities who fail recovery really miss the big picture. So that's the reason for that management cycle. That's a FEMA DHS best practice. With regard to utilities, we right now are in a support and standby mode for Director Val Fong's initiative to identify a second interconnection source. Most of our activity is actually more tactical with them right now, acknowledging that we don't yet have that interconnection. So what we're doing is attempting to build robustness in the utility control center, the UCC, and actually upgrade it to be an official department operations center, a DOC. The service of water, gas, wastewater, also shared with Public Works, of course, and the electric utility are essential lifeline facilities or services that must be maintained. So acknowledging that we have a gap in that resource is something that we've inculcated into our planning.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. On that same thread, other than a second power line, we have the increasing opportunity to have local distributed power. One of the things we were just talking about with our waste to energy facility is that that's one source for a vital function of operating our wastewater treatment plant. We have other nodes in the community, including City Hall and elements of that could be served by not only renewable generation on site, but necessary storage. Are we continuing to explore those opportunities, and are there ones that look promising?
Yes, we are, Councilmember Burt. We're aggressively exploring the opportunity to find, forgive the term, synergy with the green and resiliency efforts. In fact, I had a meeting earlier this afternoon with Gil Friend, our Chief Sustainability Officer, to explore exactly those points of tangency where we could leverage up the existing efforts both for local generation, microgridding, storage, electric vehicles, and so forth. I want to acknowledge one of my staff. We brought half the department here today, so Nathan Rainey there in the back was instrumental in writing our energy assurance plan, which is a kind of foundational document to address exactly what you brought up, which are the gaps that we have right now, the dependency on the grid, among other things, diesel supply, fuel for our emergency vehicles, for example. All that's part of kind of a comprehensive and organic approach to looking at our risk to core operations. For example, we have initiatives to put photovoltaics on certain city buildings. Public Works and utilities are working on that. We're trying to gently raise our hand from a public safety standpoint to say not only is that good for the environment, but it makes good business sense for us to acknowledge the fact that we're at risk from a wide range of things that could disrupt the grid, from cyber attack to the kind of terrorism sabotage event that we saw down in San Jose a while back, the Metcalf incident that actually Senator Jerry Hill is working on legislation to try to mitigate those kind of risks for utility infrastructure. So to answer your question, yes, we are working closely with the Chief Sustainability Officer and our other partners to make sure that we are capturing all of those opportunities.
Well, don't feel that you have to raise your hand gently on that issue.
I'll continue to be forceful.
Thanks.
Great. I have no other questions or comments. I mean, it's been said, and it'll keep on being said that you're doing a great job, and thank you for making it simple in our budget. So I'll go ahead and move the motion that we tentatively approve the Office of Emergency Services budget, seconded by Vice Mayor Niss. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. And so we will move on to future meetings and agendas, which is a great time for any colleagues to make any comments they'd like to about questions they have that they'd like to get answers to at future meetings or anything like that.
So I'd like to raise a few things because I had to miss Tuesday's meeting and like to use this opportunity to raise a few questions that I don't need answers on tonight, but I'd like to get them when we get back to our wrap-up. First, I'm going to want to have a deeper discussion around our staffing increases. I saw that we got some additional information for Tuesday, but after having spent 5 years of us during the recession, but also a long-term restructuring of our city government, of reducing pensions, reducing medical liabilities for the city, and having employees pay shares of pensions, and reducing the head count. We have a significant fraction of that reduction in headcount coming back this year, and each of those positions have strong cases that can be made for the need for them. In the aggregate, it's a fairly sizable jump in a single year, and so I'm going to be very interested in not only what you provided in what are the net changes, but which of these, well, I guess that we received an answer that they're not in the former long-term budget forecast. Those weren't in there, so they'll be additive to what we had in our expense picture there. Which of the ones that are this year are full-time permanent hires, and which ones are contract employees or outside contractors? So we may have a need this year. That need this year may evolve into and be proven as a long-term need. But I want to look at whether we're locking, which portion of these are we locking ourselves into on long-term commitments, and which are a different form of commitment. And then finally, if we, as a committee, look through and choose to make any alternative recommendations to the council as a whole, I'd like to hear from the staff. Every one of these positions, clearly the staff has determined they believe are needs, and so I acknowledge that. But not all needs are equal. And so which would be viewed as the most critical versus needed? And so those would be my questions around the staffing. I did see in the general fund summary, we basically are looking at $2 million being transferred to the reserve, or from the reserve to the general fund this year, correct? And in that sense, we're operating in a $2 million deficit this year after several years of a surplus. We put money into the reserve, we take money out of the reserve, but is that a correct way to think of that?
That is correct. So, and even if you page 431 and the budget gives you a discussion on what we have done in the past regarding the budget stabilization reserve level, and it ranges between 17.1% all the way to fiscal 2014 adopted at a higher level, 19.5%.
And I see that we are projecting that next year we will return to the positive on that. Nevertheless, that's a big deal after we went through a lot of very painful struggles to work ourselves into the positive and take those funds and invest them in additional infrastructure investment. Now, when I just described it as essentially a deficit, that includes an increased investment in infrastructure over what we were just a couple of years ago. So I appreciate that there are different ways to frame this. So it's taking $2 million from the stabilization reserve, including to use that to pay for additional infrastructure. So I don't want to misrepresent that. But I do want to look real hard at it. And I also saw within there, part of that is, or actually a majority of what is described as that $2 million shortfall this year is described as one-time expenses. But when we look at it, and I've seen this at different levels, there's a tendency to look at every non-recurring expense as if it's a one-time expense, and they really aren't the same. Because you have every few years recurring one-time expenses. It may be the same way we have election cost in here. And it's called a one-time expense, as if we're not going to have any future elections to pay for. But that's just not the case. So I think we should look at how we describe that, and we should look in our budgeting in the future that we don't budget as if we're never going to have another election or whatever thing it is. And we look at, on average, how many one-time expenses or how many dollars in one-time expenses do we have per year? And you average them out and you kind of look at them. Some of them are non-recurring annually, but recurring. And some of them are truly one-time, but there's going to be some other one-time that will occur 2 years from now that only happens one time, but it's going to happen. And it's not going to return to just the baseline of the budget. So I'd look forward to seeing some of that. City Manager, were you wanting to weigh in on that?
It's a good point, and I'm not disputing it, but I still would make the point that a real recurring expense does have bigger implications than what you're talking about. But how we express it, particularly elections, which is pretty much almost every 2 years at least, we could almost treat that as, so that one's definitely up and down. And you're right. But I would say that a lot of times our willingness to spend one-time expenses is driven a lot very much by our revenue stream. So,
right. So there are, we use the term one-time, and many of those are periodic.
Right.
And we may want to group them in two different categories there. Because if something is predictable every 2 years or every 4 years, it's not one time, but it is periodic. It's not every year. Finally, I'm interested in having additional discussions on the reorganization of the Development Center, and a question whether it's the intention with peeling that off as a standalone department, basically, correct? It's what
And a standalone department, and it's a little bit artificial this year, but for next year it will be fully actualized, a separate fund. So it'll be a separate enterprise fund. So that
And with the proposal to have 2 assistant city managers, is it the intention that that department would report directly to one of those two, and so that as we no longer have Development Center reporting to the Director of Planning and Urban Environment, it would it report directly to the city manager or to an assistant city manager? And if that's not determined, I can await that answer.
Yeah, I would say in general that there will be some reporting relationship from development services above development services. And in fact, actually, ultimately, I think we'll see a little bit more of a formal reporting structure overall for the departments as part of the reorg.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, same thing for me on the development services. I'm going to really want to understand that well. So just looking at the budget doesn't explain the new structure and stuff that well.
We'll be, pardon me, yeah, it's Tuesday, and we'll be prepared for that.
Okay, and then I thought you were going to bring up about the HISRAP.
Oh, go right ahead.
I'd ask Councilmember Burt, since this was his idea, if he wanted to bring up the notion of the HISRAP reserve fund that we talked about establishing, so that we don't have when the economy goes down, we're not putting in jeopardy those organizations that are in most needed those points in time. So if we can talk about or work in some way to establish that reserve, and we sort of tentatively talked about a figure of $50,000 to start with, but that's definitely tentative.
That almost sounds more like a parking lot item, right? I mean, that's an actual decision point on a funding decision you actually might make. Some of these other ones, I mean, you may make some reductions or whatever. But okay.
Sure.
So we didn't get a chance to talk about that at full council.
That's what I was thinking.
And when we do have it returned, I don't know, is it this Monday or a week or two from now when the council discussion on that? Additional.
So that issue itself is back on for the 19th. It is on this Monday's agenda. So you will hear that before we have the next committee.
So there may be, in that discussion, staff may want to bring forward kind of an iteration of that, where I think we were talking about a hypothetical figure of increasing HISREP by 200,000. Maybe it's 150,000 toward programs and 50,000 toward creating the first year of a reserve. So that could be part of what the council looks at on the 19th, and to create, the ability to get through those hard times.
Yes. Great. Did you guys have any comments on future meetings and agendas?
Just would like to mention that the next meeting for the budget hearings is next week on Tuesday. We are starting at 6 p.m. No, excuse me, 7 p.m. I knew it was the wrong time. We're starting at 7 p.m. next week, Tuesday. I think Council Vice Mayor Niss is going to be absent, if I'm correct. And we were going to discuss Community Services Department, the library, planning, development services, and just a few comments on special revenue funds.
That's a huge agenda.
That is quite a bit.
We'll come ready to rock and roll.
Pithy questions.
That's right. That's right.
Stay pithy. I've got to watch the tape.
Count on it. There we go. So with that,
we'll do that.
I will adjourn the meeting and thank you to everyone for a very good meeting.